3, 2, 1.
Hello everybody, Chris Schmidt here from Rocket Lasso, and this is Rocket Lasso Live episode 11. So we're going to be answering Cinema 4D questions in this video and this clip from people that are here in the live stream live. So looking forward to it. We've got a couple links popping up, some questions, some people on YouTube, some people on Twitch. I think we're ready to get going. I hope everybody is safe and healthy and happy. And let's go ahead and get on in the cinema. I'm going to pop open the screen right away so I don't forget to click it. And we got some typed out questions in YouTube, and I always like typed out questions, so we'll start out there. Love to hear how to manually keyframe an object if it has a softbody dynamics tag applied to it. Manually keyframe an object if it has a softbody tag. I mean, you can't. For one, you can't directly keyframe something once it's soft-bodied. It depends on the way you mean it. So I think we can do this super quick. Every time I say that, it turns into a 20-minute one or a 45-minute one. But let's say we have this cube, and it's going to become a soft body. And I got a couple subdivisions on there. If I hit play, it's going to start falling. Cool. Now, if you want to start keyframing it at frame 0, this is fine. We can move this easily. But if we hit play, let's see what happens. You see, I can't move it anymore because the soft body tag is on it. So the only thing that I think you can do is create, I'm going to make a null. And let's say you had a bunch of settings you customized in here. I'm going to pull the null off temporarily. And now we can say at the time of 0, we'll keyframe that in this position. We'll jump forward 30 frames. Let's scoot it over here. Keyframe that, frame 50, scoot it over. Whoa, apparently right where we are, that's fine. Keyframe that. And we're just wiggling around. So there we go, we've got it moved. And if we want to, I can rewind back to 0, hold down Alt, pull that time all the way to the end, hit a keyframe. Holding on Alt while we scrub the timeline makes it so that you're not updating the timeline, which meant it was an easy way of creating a loop there. So you can see this is going to move around doing its thing. So that works. But now we can drag our dynamics tag back on. I did at the time of 0. I'm not sure if that makes a difference, but important to note. Now, if I play right away, it's just going to fall. You see, there's actually a little bit of a wiggle right there at the beginning for the initial state, and then it immediately begins to fall. Now, the only way for this to actually start doing something would be to give it a follow position. So if we say follow position, I'm not sure how strong we have to make it, but now it's trying to maintain its position, but it is still a soft body. So this can be pretty powerful if I were to make a sphere somewhere it passes through. It's going to be hard to tell. Maybe over here. Oop, yeah, okay, that's definitely hitting it. So that will hit it at some point. So if I right-click on the sphere and add a collider body, then boom, you can see that this is still live. That still will collide, which is pretty cool. Bonk. So, I mean, I made a loop, but obviously this won't be a loop. We'd have to go loop the animation more times, but yeah, so you had to take the tag off of it to then create keyframes, but those keyframes on it don't mean anything unless you're giving it some follow position, or the exception with follow position would be at velocity peak. So if I were to right click on here and instead change the shape from dynamics, change the trigger from immediately to at velocity peak, then I think it will start moving. Yeah, it's going to start our motion and then begin falling. So you're going to see it's going to be a little bit weird. But you see how it's going to start traveling this path, and it's even traveling upward, and then suddenly it starts falling. I don't know this for a fact, but my assumption has always been that at velocity peak means as long as it's getting faster and faster and faster, it'll keep on being locked. But the instant it starts to slow down a little bit, then it's like, oh, I already peaked on velocity, become fully dynamic. And then it's going to just continue flying from that point. So those are kind of the two states that have to be in to continue. But yeah, you apply the keyframes first and then move the dynamic tag onto it. It stops you from doing it, so you can temporarily take the tag off, make changes, and then drag the tag back on again. So that should hopefully do that one. I'm going to alternate, and we'll jump over to Twitch now. Now, we did have Mick put a link very early, so I want to see what we've got here. Any chance we can replicate this bubble burst without using simulation? All right, let's see what you got here. Pause, scoot over here. All right, let's see what we got. First of all, this is the slow down show. So it seems like some people who record, like it's like the slow-mo guys, but not them. And so they're throwing a little marble at a bubble. You're saying, wow, create this without simulation. Well, I mean, there's a lot. I don't want to, like, there's always just the making of the bubble texture. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm more worried about like let's try and get something kind of blobbing around and then exploding outward in these nice little particle-y ways. So let's see if we can get that part of it going. But I like this one. Thanks for the question and the link. So we can start out pretty simply. Create a sphere. I'm going to change it to a icosahedron because you can see it turns into these triangles, which are nice and evenly subdivided. I'm going to make it a lot bigger, and we're just going to visually crank up the subdivisions. I'm going to crank them up a lot. So you can see we've got a lot of subdivisions there. It's still probably not enough. I'm worried already that I have too many. But without doing simulation, we can start getting some fun blobbies going really easily with our displacer. Hopefully this won't take too long to calculate. We got such a resolution that even the default scale has got enough res to show it, but we're going to start cranking this way up. Even that's not enough. I'm going to jump it up to at least 333. That might be too far, but now on our displacer, I can crank that. Now you can see we start getting this, some bigger wobbly shapes, but even that I feel like is not quite big enough. So we'll enlarge it. Yeah, there we go. One more time, animation speed of 1, which might be too fast. And now you can see we've got a nice, just wobbling bubble. So I think that works fine. We could add a jiggle. Jiggle, 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 jiggle. There it is. I don't know how, well, first of all, there's a lot of polys here, but yeah, it's going to slow us down a lot. But this would, instead of it being completely random, there start being like some nice overshoot and things like that. It's going too slow for our purposes here, so I'm going to leave it off. And now you can just see we get this nice warping bubble. That'll just go forever. There's a couple cool details. First of all, we control the speed here, so this is going very fast, and I think the final thing is a slow motion animation, so maybe it wouldn't change much at all, but you just say like 0.1 and now you can see it's moving very slowly, so you have complete control over the speed. In addition to that, right now we're warping in all directions potentially, but we could warp it in just a singular direction. Right now it's pushing in and out. We have just push out. There's a lot of control we have there, but we also have something called loop period. And I'm going to put this back up to 1. And loop period is based on seconds. So I think if we say 3 on this, then you're going to see we're actually getting a looping animation every 3 seconds. Now that's looping at the 3rd second, which is frame 90, because we're at 30 frames a second. So if we want this to be a perfect loop, we'd actually just chop off 1 frame from our animation. So we're actually going 89 because frame 90 will look identical to frame 0. So by chopping off that frame, I now have got a perfect looping noise forever, which is pretty neat. So I don't think we actually have to keep the loop. I thought it was a nice detail to share. Let's save it because it's about to get very... it's going to be risky to put in the next part. So scene files. For anybody who's new, all the scene files that I save here will be available on Patreon. So make sure you check out a link in the description if you want to help support the show. Bubble burst. Cool. All right, now there is something that is a deformer, but actually lives inside of the MoGraph menu. It's called PolyFX, and it's pretty great. Now, it is a deformer. It's even colored purple because it is a deformer. But what's neat about this is it affects every single polygon, but it still is treating it as a single object. So it actually calculates shockingly fast because it's not, well, let me show you the effect. If we were to just have PolyFX selected and create a random, it should explode everything. You see every single one is exploded outward. You can see we've got so many polygons. But if I play, it's slower, but look, we're still getting a pretty reasonable frame rate. I was doing some screenshots earlier, so I had to turn off the FPS because it was in the way, but I'm going to turn it back on because I really like that info. So we're going to hit the shortcut of Alt-V, click this viewport, click HUD, and I'm going to go find FPS, frames per second, and there, now we can see the frames per second. So let's see what kind of hit we're taking from this. So without PolyFX, this is running at about 32, and if we explode this, then we are running at about 7. So, obviously it's taking some time. There's actually a lot more polygons or points and edges, because you got to think about it. When this isn't on, this polygon is made of 1, 2, 3 points. And then, but 2 of those points are also shared by the neighbor. But when we explode it, then we've got 1, 2, 3 points, but its neighbor now has its own 1, 2, 3 points, and they're not sharing an edge. And there is a lot more information here, but it's still one object. Imagine if this was a cloner, each cloning one little clone. That would be taking forever to calculate. But now we just have all these little points, and to tell you the truth, it looks pretty cool. It's pretty neat. I wonder if SSAO will, these are probably too small for SSAO to do too much detail. We could change the settings, but that's fine. Okay, so we've got this bubbling around, and we have this random effect, which is, I think random's fine. Yeah, I think random's a good idea. So yeah, let's keep it pretty straightforward. We'll make a linear field, and it looks like I've been working on it. I'll just spin the camera around so we're at this angle. Or if we want to even match it, because that was video footage, so I don't mind trying to match it a little bit more accurately. So as we push through, where do we want these pieces to ultimately go? Now, we could make it so that this fall off is really long and it could keep on continuously getting more detail. But something that I like is, you'll see here that as this passes through, once one of the polygons has reached this point, it's not going to move anymore. It's static now. But if we do the settings correctly, and I don't remember them, so we'll have to figure it out, is I want to unclamp it. So the first thing we can do is in the linear field, go to remapping, and you see we've got a clamp on the min and the max. I'm going to unclamp the max. I know we have to do that. Now, nothing changed yet, because we also have to go into our random and turn off the clamping on the random. And okay, there definitely was a change. Let's see if that's all we needed to do. Yeah, that's all we had to do is those two things. I said unclamp, so the number can go higher. So essentially, this is still a linear field going from 0 to 100, but now it's also going from 100 to 200, 300. It's just going to keep on going. And now we had to also unclamp this field, because currently the field was only accepting numbers between 0 and 1, or 0 and 100%. But now we've turned off clamp, so it can go above that. So with those two things in mind, this linear field that we can completely control how much it's pinched and do that transition, but all of the pieces that come after it will keep on doing the motion more and more and more. So nice detail. Now, another thing we could do if we want to have a little bit more artistic control over this is, how does this arc in? I actually don't know how this would have an effect on the ones that come later, but let's find out. I'm going to turn on a contour and put a curve, and we can set this curve to whatever we like. So we can have it kind of accelerate into this shape. So if I did something like this, they're not going to be affected very much on the edge until they finally are affected. Now it does actually, by doing this, you see, and I'm actually not surprised. I was worried it would happen, but that actually broke my unclamped thing. And maybe that's actually funny, because me and EJ were doing some of this on the 3D motion tour. And we were like, why does it work sometimes and not others? It's probably because sometimes EJ was first changing this curve before he did all that clamping stuff. So we actually have to leave that on none if that clamping thing is going to be a thing. But we do still have the control of pinching this in as tight as we want or as far as we want. Now, keep in mind that as this pinches down, this is now 0 to 100, which means that's 200, 300. And now these are being affected a lot more. So if we want this transition to happen very quickly, then we probably need to lower the overall strength, because that, like these early ones are moving 50, 50, 50 right there. But that means over here, they've traveled like 500, 500, 500. Various things to keep in mind. All right, so I do want a larger transition there. So we'll crank that up a little bit more. These can start traveling in, and I like that. In addition to that, I think these pieces should rotate. So we will put in a full, I mean, it's going to be, this is additive, so we don't have to go crazy. I'm going to say 90, 90, 90. Now, by default, random effectors have a min and a max of negative 100 to positive 100. So 90, 90, 90 actually means negative 90 to positive 90. So these will spin in all directions. And because it's additive, they'll just keep on spinning and spinning and spinning. So they should never stop. So you get this nice explosion. So that is working great. And I think the last thing we want is these have to fade away. Now we can't fade away with a random, so we'll have to add a second effector. So MoGraph menu, I've got the cloner selected, or rather the PolyFX selected. I can create a plane effector, and the plane effector is going to do one thing. It's going to scale everything down to uniform absolute a uniform absolute scale of -1, and now everything's going to shrink down to 0. Go to fall off and control it via the same linear field. Now, the only thing I'm a little worried about is, oh, actually, it's probably not. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, this plane field is not clamped or not unclamped. Thus, this linear field can't push beyond 100 because then I think that these would invert themselves and start growing again. Actually, I'm curious if that'll happen. So I'm going to turn it on. Yep, I was totally right. So these are actually shrinking down, and then they get to 0 and they start shrinking up on negative, and then they'll suddenly appear again. But there's a separate effector, which means we can clamp it, and now they do still get clamped, which is wonderful. Now, if this is shrinking down to 0, we actually didn't need that whole clamping thing. So, yeah, just throwing it out there, but important, neat details. Actually, to tell you the truth, I think I would like to put the curve back in because now you can see we're going to get this nice curvature out, and I think I want that to happen. So because we're already fading it out to 0, then I think we're good to do that. I want more randomness in the way these travel. Now, this is going from left to right, so we've got our X, and this is going to make them travel inward and outward. And I think a little bit of that is good, but now I want this to go further on these, but I'm not going to extend X because we're traveling along X, and I just want them to shatter out more and not travel. Like, I don't want it getting ahead of the effector that we're passing through it. So that seems all good. You can now see that this is transitioning in. They're exploding outward as they shrink. Very nice. We could even do some remapping there where it's like, the way that these are, I don't know. I think when you're seeing the effect, we haven't gone back and looked at the reference. It's always a good idea to look at your reference often. And let's see if I can crank up the res at all. You can a little bit. So, I mean, I think we're going to get a pretty good facsimile of this, but you see, they feel like they've really changed right as it gets to that edge. So I'm feeling like we need to. I like this kind of ramping in, but I think it needs to have a pretty large effect pretty quick. Now, I think we actually should be able to get control of that pretty easily by just changing this arc here. So we can be like, okay, as soon as it enters, it has a very large effect, and then it takes a while to get to this next step. So we could do that overall like this, but we could also... I'm going to undo that because we could do that, but that's applying to both our plane effector and our random effector. If we wanted to, we can actually go into the plane effector, into its fall off, and instead of just using what we were fed, I can create a curve here, and this is looking at whatever came below, and now I can remap what it's being fed. Now we have to keep in mind that this isn't the same curve, but it's remapping the curve, so we still want to kind of change it in place. But as I pull this up, you can see the effect is changing very quickly. What I think I want to do is very quickly ramp up because I want these early ones to scale a lot. And then it's going to take a while for it to do the final fade out. And yeah, I guess I can keep on accelerating. I'll have that be pretty flat. So this is taking that curve and remapping it. And we got to be really careful to be really sensitive. But if I pull this in, yeah, the transition happens really quick. Yeah, something like that. You see they shrink down really quick. So how far do we want them to shrink? I'm thinking something like that. So it's going to happen very quickly. It takes a while before they start rotating. So it's a push and pull. I just wanted to show you could apply it to both. Now, something that is potentially dangerous is any change that I make to this linear fields curve is going to also affect the plane curve. So something we could do is I'm going to copy that, and let's set this back to actually not a curve at all. It'll just become linear again. And now inside the random, we can put the curve in, and I'll paste the curve in there. So now the random has one curve and the plane has another, and they're just supposed to both based off that linear curve. So we get a little bit more direct control that way. So it's kind of nice being able to think about those a little bit separately. Now, the reason I copied this in the random and got this curve is I do like this curve, but at the same time, I think I would like to do a similar thing where they will very rapidly change their initial state at least a little bit. So yeah, those can change the rotation just so it's like, okay, there's a very distinct line of delineation between the two. So, okay, cool. We've done that. Next up, How quickly are those rotating? I feel like they're not rotating terribly quickly, so we're going to crank that up. I mean, they're really tiny. This is more about catching highlights, but I'm going to, well, that's probably a lot. Let's do 4 times as much. Because I want these to rotate a decent amount pretty quickly. And yeah, now they do seem to be rotating a decent amount pretty quickly. And okay, so what is next? What is next is adding variation in this line. Right now we get this very perfect line, and I think we'll see in this reference that is definitely not perfect. There's some variation in the way it's traveling. So, I mean, easily we could just rotate this direction. We're controlling everything just with this linear field, so we have complete control that way. But we can, I guess what I should do, and I probably should have done this earlier, is let's put that into a group field. So lots of ways we can do that. We could make a group field from scratch. We can go to our random fall off and create not a folder. We actually need to create a group field, and it's actually going to create one automatically. And then in here, feed our linear field and then drag that down to the bottom. So nothing's changed. It's just, it is in a group field. But now we have to go into our plane and also drag that group field and then get rid of the linear. So now we've gotten rid of the linear, but you can see it's now represented inside of that group field. The reason for doing that is now we can make changes inside of this group field, and anything that happens inside of it will propagate to everything else, and we don't have to keep dragging everything every single time. It's kind of like putting it into a connect in a way. So nice linear transition, but we want some randomness. And 2 different ways to do that would be using a shader field or using a random field. Random fields are pretty great for this type of thing. So I will create a random field. This is going to, currently it's set to max, so it's applying everywhere. We don't want that. I'm going to try setting it to overlay, which means it should only affect kind of this transitional point. And now the noise, which did default to a noise, it's very small. So we're going to have to crank it up pretty big. And we already know that we're like in the 5,000 range on this overall thing. So let's jump up to 3,000. I'm definitely seeing a little bit there, but this line doesn't feel terribly different. I think I am seeing a little bit of variation, but it's not that much. Yeah, it's okay. It's super minute. Now, I guess that might make sense because, let's see, what's the best way to do this? It makes sense because you can't overlay, which, makes whites whiter and blacks blacker. It's going to start pushing the numbers more to 0, more to 100%. You can't do that at 0%. It's already at that. So that's not actually going to affect the line. So let's just set this to normal. And we've got, so it's completely just the random field applying everywhere. We could, let me think, what's the best way to do this? Would it be, can we mask it? Maybe, I don't know. I don't have a very distinct path here. So I would at this point just start tinkering around until I got a combination that works. Tried masking that. Let's try doing the opposite. I'm going to try masking the random field. That's still doing a pretty hard cut. Let me think. Random, linear. Let's see. I'm also scrolling down just to make sure there's nobody shouting anything. Yeah, everybody's chatting, which is awesome. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. If we can figure this out, I am enjoying like the effect we're getting. I think it's actually pretty reasonable. And I love when we're referencing like real life stuff. So anyway, how would I do this? Why am I kind of blanking on it? Now we have a field. We have a remapping. I feel like this isn't that complicated. I'm just completely blanking on it. Maybe we just multiply the effect instead of overlaying. Yeah, if I'm being dumb and somebody has a like, why are you just do this? Then let me know. I wonder if that seems, like I said, when in this kind of circumstance, I would just begin tinkering. That's how much it's being affected. But we want that hard cutoff. Yeah, everybody. People are saying vertex map with noise. That would be a lot of points and a lot more calculation. But that would totally work. It would work. I like that's a good card to keep in our pocket. I'm going to keep it in mind, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Now, just for demonstration purposes, because this isn't displaying what the random field is doing very much, I'm going to create a curve. You can do this not just with a curve. There's a lot of different ways, but I'm going to do it visually with a curve, and you can see, here you can, as I crank this up, you can see where the noise is actually getting applied. Now, I wonder if the noise is just too subtle, so we're not seeing that curvature because it's all happening very slowly. So you see, as I drag this in, that there is actually a little bit more of a harsh line there that's imperfect. So did I just have to crank that before the linear line could actually act upon it? So if we set that to overlay, oh, okay, that does do something. So I think we just weren't in a range that was helping very much. So yeah, we have a lot of options as far as, I can multiply. This is clamped. Interesting, because that, I guess, it hits there. So that's where the overlay is happening. And then I'm kind of curious because it feels like, we're getting some results in the back that we didn't quite completely get. And then even here, trickier than I thought it would be. The vertex map is still a good option. I'm going to shrink this a little bit now we can actually see it. Yeah, something like that. And then overlay. Yeah, eventually that would have to get erased out. So does this mean that we just have to take the curve and chop off the extremes? Not quite, because the linear field, it's so cool, but we still don't have it working. The vertex map is going to be so big. Yeah, I'm starting to think the vertex map with shader is perhaps a way to go. Like, I am pretty sure that there's a more elegant way of doing this. It is just not. My brain is not making that connection. So everything that we've made so far is still valid, except this random field is not doing anything anymore. I'm going to turn that off, and now we're just kind of back to the linear field. So we might go back to using some of that, but I'm just put the linear field back on it. We're back to where we were, so nothing's changed. Now, what I would like to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of the sphere, and I'm going to turn on, we don't need the jiggle, we don't need the FX. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. So we've got a second sphere, but this second sphere does not need anywhere near as many points. We do not want a vertex map that's that many. So I'm going to drop this down to, I don't know, 88. That's 89. Yeah, that seems like an okay number. Then we make it editable, and then we select a point. Actually, you don't even have to select a point. We just have to go to select, set vertex weight, and I'm going to say 0. So now there's a vertex map, and it's set to 0. We create a field. The field needs a starting point. So, I mean, we could have a point. I could select that and set the vertex weight. Well, let's try that. I so rarely do, but let's try that. I guess the reason, let's not do that, because we can keyframe something in and then change when it begins. And if we have it already there in the beginning, it's going to be there in the beginning. So by adding a spherical field here, and we don't need the freeze. Well, I guess we will, but not for a moment. Now, when I drag this in, it's going to suddenly create an area that can expand. Excellent. So with that expanding, I'll set that to normal. I'm going to temporarily hide the other sphere too, because we don't need to worry about it. So you just have this one sphere, and it should be doing the same kind of blobby motion. I think that will carry through. So now we need it to grow, and that should be pretty straightforward. We use a freeze, turn it to grow, and like, I think even if we hit right now, it should do, it did a little something, but not too much. And that's because the radius needs to be larger, because these are probably pretty large. I don't know, essentially this radius needs to be at least the space between triangles. So if I jump that to 20, Still not enough. Grow more. There. And once we cross a threshold, now we could pause this, go to 2 points, and I'm going to eyeball this, but by selecting these 2 points, it's a triangle, but you see that that's about 24 on Y, so it's probably in the 30-ish range, meaning anything above 30, 35. If I do that, then you should see it's enough for it to start growing. So this is going to control how quickly this travels, which is excellent. That is what we want. Now we have other options. We could lower the effect strength. If I lower the effect strength down to 50%, this should travel at half the speed. Now, because what's happening is as this grows, it's only 50% applied, so it doesn't turn fully yellow until 2 frames have gone by. So if we cut this in half again to say 25, it's going to take twice again. It's going to take twice as long again and again. As we keep on cutting in half, we're actually doubling the length of time. So that is actually doing a very nice job. I do think we want it to be, I guess it was in super slow-mo, so let's keep it moving at this speed. I think this is a reasonable speed. So already there's like a little bit of imperfection the way it's traveling just by our poly layouts, but we can go into remapping. Actually, it's not remapping. It is the freeze has a additional parameter that we can control, and that's the radius. And you'll see if we twirl this down, there's a setting called radius. So we can control that radius with something. Now, I knew I didn't delete this random field for a reason. So we got this random field we're not using anywhere. I'm going to turn it on and make sure that it's off in this hierarchy. It's not doing anything there, but I do want it to do something inside of our vertex map. So we'll drag it over here just so it has that visual relationship. It's not literally doing it. And I'm going to add this random field into that radius. So now the radius is being multiplied by the random field. So the radius is actually shrinking when the noise is a particular color. Now we're going to have to tweak this a little bit. And already you can see that's enough for this not to grow at all. So, oh, yeah, it's actually not enough to grow until suddenly it hit a moment where it was big enough for it to grow. But it's having a pretty big effect. And I think the scale is still probably pretty good. So what we need to do is bring back that curve we had. So random field above the random field, we'll create that lovely curve. Put that into here. And that should be able to remap that. And we have too many low values and not enough high values. I think if I crank this up all the way, it should go back to fully growing. Excellent. I'm currently following the train. So as we start pulling this, it's going to be like, oh, it's remapping that random noise to be big enough to start spreading a little bit. Now we could crank this up pretty heavily and you're going to see it's going to grow, but leave these pieces behind. So, and what we really want to do is just slow it down a little bit. So we can start pulling up this minimum and just having it actually kind of, there's a lot of combinations here. I hope I'm not losing anybody. But if we were to grab our freeze and make the radius pretty big, I'm going to double the radius. So now it's very likely to grow. But now we have more of a range. It's like, oh, it's growing no matter what. But now we can be like, but you're going to grow slower because if you're half the size, you'll grow at half the rate. So it will still be growing, but at half that. So now with this at the halfway point, you can see we're getting nice consistent growth all the time, but you can see we've got this nice variation in the way it's actually traveling to the left, which is pretty much exactly what we want. And okay, and then once again, this is the spherical field is actually the start point. So if this is moved away, actually, we gotta be careful because you see that dot is still there. And even if I rewind, it's still there, still there, still there. That used to drive me nuts. But then I realized that what we have to do is go into your freeze and say clear because it was remembering the initial states before. Now let's hope that this works. Nope, I was worried that that wouldn't, and it didn't. It's not acknowledging this. So I think what we have to do is set the freeze to add. There we go. So with the freeze set to add, if I drag this out, it's going to be at 0. And as soon as this touches it, then now it suddenly can spread. And there we go. That is now spreading. Now, all of that work was merely to get this vertex tag. This now has very useful information to us. And this will now just be vertex map sphere. So we have a vertex map inside of our group field, which is affecting the actual popping. We don't want to control it with this linear field anymore. We want to control it with the growing. So I could just turn that off in case we need to go back. I don't think we will, but I like working non-destructively when possible. Drag in the vertex map of a completely unrelated object. This is the magic of fields, is that vertex maps have turned into the universal translator of Cinema 4D now, because we now are transferring the information from a completely unrelated point count onto a different object, which is awesome. So that is our vertex map. It is going to grow and spread. If we go back to our original sphere, which we can turn on again, the effect should propagate from that, because everything is inside the vertex, inside of this poly effects, inside the effectors tab. So yeah, the random plane is there. So hopefully as that vertex map is able to spread, then we will start to see the effect come through. Now, I'm worried. I thought we'd already be seeing something, and we're not. So we got to figure out what's going on. First of all, let's see. Oh, our sphere. Oh, we have to move we have to have the spherical field go over. Now, I don't want to have to keep, we could keyframe it. I guess that's the obvious thing to do. So we'll say at the time of 0, it is right here on X. And we don't need to wait too long. 10 frames in, we'll just have this travel right through. So even if it blobs around, it's definitely going to reach it. So we should have a frame or two where it's not going, and then it will start. So let's get rid of that. Let's change our display mode. NA, I constantly go between NB, which shows polygons, and NA, which doesn't show the polygons, just as a way of jumping between. So we haven't saved in a while. Let's give this a new letter, 1B, and now hit play. And then that hits, and now that's going to start spreading across and doing an excellent job of dissolving, except for everything is being affected very dramatically, very quickly, but then this one is taking a while to get there. So let's figure out why that is. The plane effector is getting fed that new vertex map, and then it's got this curve happening. And that seems, I'm going to assume that that's the difference between the two. Now, is this point, I need to see the data from it. No, see, it's a little bit to the right. I thought that this would, I thought X would say 0, but it is technically, well, there's a tangent on it. Yeah, that tangent actually, yeah, it's a tangent on it. All right. Okay, let me try and make this English. I'm going to say show in separate window or not. Oh, that's weird. Is that a bug? You're supposed to be able to pop this out into a separate window, but it's not filling in because I want to zoom up on this. I can still do that. You see that I have this point, and this point is not technically against the wall. It's actually 0.16 over to the right. It's a very small amount, but actually that's a tangent on the right. The point is on X0. So yeah, maybe I just was completely wrong on all that. There, sorry, it was not unfull screening. So what I need to do is, what is this? It's super hanging. So I might be crashing or freezing or something. So apologies if I disappear. This is, wow, it's super hanging. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, let's stop trying to force them to open up windows that don't seem to be working correctly. All right, sorry. What I would like to do, and I look at this weird black outline. I'm assuming some weird video card, something or other just happened. Anyway, if this point, let's see if we can get it working. If I move this point away from the wall a little bit, then this actually got a little bit of transition time. But as long as that's all the way against the wall, even something that was marked red now has an initial value. So we just have to scoot that away from the wall. Now, if this curve, if its left tangent is big enough, and I don't know that it is, but if it's a really big tangent, then that line will, even though the point isn't there, it's going to arc over there just like a regular spine. You see right down there that there's a tiny little line that might reach the wall very quickly. So I'm going to give us a tangent of 0 over there. So it's now a straight line up to that point. So it should get a very large effect, but it's not going to happen right away. And we can have this number be very small. It's barely scooted away from the wall at all. Okay, just hopefully with that little change. And I'm actually going to save it as another name again, even though we didn't really change much because I want to be able to go back to the other one in case we just infected the file somehow. Hit play, and let's see what we get. Okay, it's dissolving really well. It's actually running incredibly well. And yeah, look at that. Not bad. Excellent. Okay, quite pleased with that. So boom. Now we do get this really big initial burst. You see how this initial boom, it's really quick in the beginning. That's probably because our start point is very large. You see, it's a big old thing. I'm gonna say, hey, you are full power, so no fall off. So full inner offset, full power all the time, but it's gonna be pretty tiny. Set that down to 5. 5 is maybe a little small. We need to at least hit a point. So this should go in and boom. Okay, if that's small enough that it went too quickly through and didn't collide, I'm gonna slow it down. So it's going to take extra frames to get there. With it moving more slowly, hopefully it will actually hit one. Again, it did not, sadly. Okay, we do have to make it a little bit bigger just to be big enough to hit. So there we go. That goes. It begins spreading. And everything is doing a pretty good job of disappearing. I feel like everything is not showing the final state super well. And okay, well, no, that's fine. Everything's working well here. Now, these are starting to crack a little tiny bit ahead of time, but I kind of want it to be nothing and then a lot. So I think that just goes back to we can do it individually on both the plane with this curve again. And just for curiosity, I'm going to delete that point entirely. Yeah, you see that's not it. And there's going to be a large transition slowly happening there. The spread actually is very fast. There's only a little bit of a transition time. I'm actually surprised at how much transition we are getting, where it's like, oh, this isn't fully spread. We did make the circle larger, but I'm still surprised. Anyway, what do I think we need to do here? Well, let's simplify. We don't need that linear field anymore. We don't need that curve. We don't need this random. Yeah, it was safe to delete that. It didn't delete it from here. But this group field is still containing the vertex map, which is nice because we can drag this between. It's now, it's being fed into both the random and the plane. Good to know. Now, the plane, well, let's keep in mind, let's look at the vertex map that we're actually feeding in. So yeah, we can actually see that there's a decent amount of transition happening here. And these must have a little bit of the value applied. So what am I thinking? I mean, we should be able to just remap the initial feed in. So we go to this group field that's being fed this vertex map. It's purely referencing it. So if I were to put a curve on this one, it's going to affect both the random and the plane. I'm going to drag this group field out just because, it's not, I'm going to group them actually. So these are all grouped and this is affecting both of them. So with that nice big transition, if I were to begin remapping this curve, then I could say like have no effect until a certain point. You can see that's going to clamp it completely off. So it is there or it's not. We also could pull it. We can't pull it up, but we can do a very similar thing that we had before on the plane, which is make a point and scoot it way over. And now, yeah, it's a very similar thing, but it's coming directly off the vertex map and not within the individual shape, which I think is good. I'm once again going to get rid of my X tangent. Oops, that's X tangent, not the actual point. So that's actually curving down. I'm going to say 0, so it's just, this has no tangent whatsoever. So that's a straight line, just connecting between the two, in which case this could be very, very small, 0.001, the smallest possible number in Cinema 4D. And now we get a much quicker transition there, and it's going to take longer for them to fade out. But this curve is ultimately what the overall effect is going to be. So in spite of the remapping we've done on the other ones, we could have this curve in or out more or less. Something that I am finding a little bit interesting is how this is suddenly exploding very much on the outside, very late, where I kind of want it to be a little bit more constant. I'm thinking that that's probably because of this curve. And maybe this plane is catching up as well. So I'm turning off their individual remaps. Interesting. It's very little until it gets to be a lot. But maybe the way it's spreading right now via the vertex map, that it's actually very weakly applied until it suddenly ramps up at the end, like a natural ramping up where it's not at 100 yet. Okay, so that's the assumption I'm going to go on. Now I don't want to lose this plane remapping because I like the way that looks better. But inside of our group field where we're doing this remapping, I think that we can, currently it's, we need to give more attention to the earlier part. So I think if we start pushing this curve in, then yeah, you're going to see we're going to start getting a better transition there. So what we got to be careful, because we're fighting against the natural curve of we're fighting against the natural curve of the way the vertex map is growing. Now, another issue I'm seeing, and actually, I mean, this is really fun fields talk, and we don't talk about fields too much. So, because of the shape that we're feeding in these triangles. Those points are being mapped onto here, but this resolution is much lower than here. So you can see a visual pattern emerging. You can see that, especially when I zoom out and we do this, that you can see that we're getting kind of this hexagon-esque pattern because it's trying to reach the nearest triangle. So let's see if we can get around that a little bit by going into the group field where we're importing our vertex map, and currently it's trying to find the nearest point. But if instead we say we want the average point, then that should, that's going to transition better between them. We already know 30 was a pretty big range. I'm going to say 30 here. Essentially, I don't want to blur any more than I have to. So I just want to blur enough that we're not feeling those hexagons. Now, the triangles we estimated was about 30, 35. So I think as we get in that range, then those will be blurred enough where we can't tell. We could always double that number up to 70, and that would be very safe that those did burst in that way. Now, why are we getting almost like this? You see how we like this hollow area in the middle? It's almost like we have the effect twice. I'm just going to rewind and let's see if I can figure out. Let's see if we can figure out why that is happening. Passes through. Very nice burst, spreading across. Yeah, look at that. What is that? Hello. Double layered sphere. Nothing we've done should have created a second layer sphere, and this original vertex map isn't being affected. Is it? Is it? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I know exactly what this is. So, what is happening? Well, these parts, and maybe I was wrong. Remember I was saying the vertex map? Remember I was saying the vertex map was maybe had a curvature to it? Maybe it does. But what is actually potentially happening here is as these move away, they're moving so far away that they've fallen out of the distance that we've now designated for this vertex map. So it's like, oh, I moved too far away, start moving closer again. And it moves closer, and I think it's finding a balance point right there. So the way we can get around this is to create a decay. And now we're going to say, hey, when you reach a value, hit the maximum, don't fade away. When you have gotten up to a certain point, you're stuck at that upper point. So let's see if this works. Maybe. No. It's better, but they're not all getting to their final point. Now, that might have been my mistake because this curve here might arc above it. And that's potentially dangerous. And then we have to, now because that decays there, it's introduced time into the equation. So we have to rerun this every time because we're going to get different results. So a lot of that might have been my fault for this counter arc. I'm going to turn it off entirely. Let's see. No, it's still there even without our counter arc. So now what I'm thinking is some of these are not ever getting up to their full value. We're trying to get more advanced, and as we make it more advanced, we add more layers where it can complicate. So I'm still interested, but, and this was, I don't want to say it's the problem with using a vertex map, but it's a problem we're having used the vertex map. Yeah, I think everything I'm saying there is accurate. They're moving away. Yeah, they're moving away before they get fully weighted. Interesting. So if they move away before they get fully weighted, I got some weird processes we could do to fix this. I got several ideas. I'm trying to think of what the best one is, and even like what the most informative one would be. So, okay. So one thought I'm having is, what if we really crank up the contrast, and then, does that make sense? What if we really crank up the contrast do the transition, and then smooth it out with like using an even. Can we use an even? Is there such a thing as an even? Because if we use delay, then yeah, we have things like smooth. Okay, this will be interesting and weird. It's something I've done, and I'm curious if it'll be applicable here. Okay, how do I explain this best? So here's the thought. I'm going to make a second vertex map as a way of just showing what we're doing. So the second vertex map is going to be completely empty, devoid of all information. We're going to feed the first vertex map in, and I'm going to say, hey, I want you to interpret that by averaging out the information and going all the way up to 70, which is what we had before. So now we're just paying attention to this new vertex map, which is referencing the first one. And actually, look at that. That's weird. I thought that maybe I could be wrong on everything, because you can see as we're viewing the second version of the vertex map, you can see how it's actually fading out and then fading back in again. Maybe that's where the problem's coming from. And I mean, it's good to visualize this, because if I click on this original one, you can see that that's not a problem. It's just spreading out and it's going across. That's fine. But when I try and change it to average, it doesn't like it. Now, are there ways around that? Like this goes white and then gets pale. So in this vertex map, could I do that same thing where I said, hey, decay, go up maximum. So now when this spreads, it got to a certain point, but you see it didn't actually finish it off. It gets to a max and then fades. Or it doesn't fade. It gets to a max, but doesn't get to it got to its local maximum, but it doesn't get all the way up to a bigger number. So this just seems to be a problem with the average, and it's not a problem. It's just the nature of it. We're saying, hey, reference this other thing. It's averaging the numbers, and because we're averaging it that way, it just never quite gets to that final amount. Now, the reason we were doing the average was to blur that edge a little bit more. So why don't we fix this in this vertex map the way we're doing it here? So currently we're saying, okay, let's bring in the average, which should blur it a lot. So we are getting this nice blur. And it's a really cool way of getting it smoothed out. So this is smoothing it out, but we need it to get up to a total maximum. We need to get all the way up to 100%. So I'm trying to think of what the best way to do that is. We potentially we could put this is going to be weird. I've never done this, but if we make a second freeze, this freeze could also say it's trying to grow, and oh man, this is going to be weird. It's trying to grow. I have to clear the initial state. Clear and add. Yeah, okay, interesting. Okay, so what we're doing is this is freeze is saying like, hey, I'm going to look for any numbers and then start growing them. But I gave it a very small radius. You see the radius is very small. So as this goes through, it's saying like, oh, I've achieved a little bit of a number. I can take that and start building off of it and start applying the strength again. So it's doing that. And what's happening is this right away, it's doing a refresh and cranking the strength up to 100%. So you can see now that it did color that in all the way. Now it's happening a little too quickly. We'd want the transition to be a little bit slower. So I'm going to say 25%. And because I don't want to kill this this initial part, I do want that transition. And there, now you see that this is getting up to full yellow, and it's getting up to full yellow very quickly. But we do still have a nice little bit of transition in the front. How much can we push that down? I'm going to say 10. I want to get as much of a transition in the front as we can, and as much maximum value here as we can. That seems to be working pretty well. We got a transition in the front, and this is all, it's all full color back there. So that's one thing. So now we have a new vertex map here. I'm going to call it vertex map 2. And now we can go back into our field here, and I'm going to replace the old one with this one. So now that's all we've done is replaced one with the other. Nothing else has changed. And even the decay is off, the curve is off, everything is off. So with that new vertex map fed into the group field, let's turn on our sphere, and let's see just what that does, if this helps at all. That's going to explode outward. It should get all, well, I mean, this is still set to average, so I'm going to say nearest. Yeah, back to nearest. Average definitely was causing us the trouble. So now it's going back to the nearest, and hopefully we're blurring it enough in the other one where that smoothed out the wall. Like, are we feeling some sort of hexagon pattern? And I'm not really. That's working pretty well. Now, I do have to say that we're still lacking in this transition in a way. I'm going to turn off the random, and I just want to see what we're dealing with here. What I would love to have happen, let's just look at the way the plane is affected. So it's having a big effect very quickly. The highlight, let me turn off highlighting. Every time I move my mouse, it's highlighting it, and thus not highlight handles. Isn't there just highlighting? Component highlighting? No. It's one of these, and I'm not sure which guides gradient object highlighting. Nope, that seems also not to be it. Unless it's just yeah. Now when I mouse over it, it's not freaking out. So I think it was object highlighting. So excellent. Now the effect happens. We want the effect to happen pretty quick, and then it's going to fade out. Now we are seeing a little bit of the hexagon pattern. You can very distinctly see that this shape has a little bit, and this was my worry of using a vertex map, is the resolution. So how can we get around that? Like, the way I get around that would be to use the average, but then it moves away. It's instantly breaking it. Although, okay, I'm gonna put on average here. You can see as soon as I put on an average, look, it's so much better blurred. There's still a little bit of pattern. You can see how they're almost like coming back into existence here, which is interesting. And yeah, oh, it's super. I mean, it's cool, but you can see here as we do the average, it's spreading out, and then they fade into each other, and we have to see at what point that we can't tell anymore. And it's like at this point, yeah, I'm getting up pretty high, but that's like 150-ish, which is, I guess, about doubling the 70. Now you see we get this nice, big, pretty smooth transition. Now, is this working? Will this travel smoothly all the way across? If it does, then we're looking pretty good. Now, we got these little things all wiggling around. So it looks like there's a little bit of a remainder. I'm curious what those are, but I think that, yeah, given enough frames, this will fade out. I thought this would be a lot quicker, everybody, but I'm not upset that we're continuing on this one for a little while, because I think there's lots of good fields information here. Now, we're still ending up with these tiny little ones. Now, that's all coming from the plane effector, and we do have this curve. I'm going to turn off the curve, and they're still there, which is telling me that this vertex map is pretty much saying it's never getting to 100%. Now, I don't necessarily, I mean, I wish it was, but if it's not getting to 100%, it might not be getting to 100% because of, and people chatting on YouTube. I'm seeing the chats coming in. I'm not tackling any more questions, and I will look at those for questions. But if you want to type in a link, you have to go onto Twitch. Otherwise, you have to type out a question. But in any case, this doesn't seem to be reaching 100%, because otherwise this plane, which is saying go full -1 to disappear, it's not happening. So now we've got this curve, which is already in theory doing something I want. So if I were to just take this peak point and pull it down a little bit, or I do have to do the opposite. Okay, I need to grab this peak point and start scooting it to the left. And as I scoot to the left, it is now just remapping it to the point where they actually do to get to 100%. So having done that little bit of remapping, let's see what we get. Yeah, the effect is pretty large in the beginning, and it takes a little bit for it to fade away. That's pretty much exactly what we want to have happen. So now that seems to be working, now we'll add in the random and see. Now, I wonder if what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the order. Let's see if it actually has an effect, because you saw the way it was like fading out. The way these explode out seems weird, although that looks great. Oh, it's so good. But actually, yeah, look, See how these are, look, they're getting left behind seemingly. So, and we get this, the double shell effect going. I think we might be able to fix this actually by rearranging the order of our effectors, because the scaling down is being calculated after they've randomly been moved into new positions. But if we say, no, first you scale and then you move, then there we go. Now they get the scale down to their 0 position. And when they move, they've already been scaled down. So it doesn't matter. And now, yeah, those are properly fading away. So with those fading away properly, we can go back into our random. Actually, we'll go into, the random and go to its fall off. It has a curve, but we're not doing anything with it because I think we were even doing something weird where we're trying to like counter the arc. So I'm going to leave that off. And now we're just being fed the default vanilla group, which is just this stuff, which is also not remapped in any way. So, let's just make this spread in the way that we want it to, which means it's a little dangerous because, curves on curves become hard to distinguish. But I would sort of like to have this like start at 0, but quickly accelerate in a bit. And then it can take a little while to fade out. This seems okay. Now we can have the random spread out and spin as much as we want. Currently, actually, something that's, I guess the average is coming in, but I still want that. Oh, the plane effector is doing this remapping, but the random isn't, and the random is separating them from each other, and that's just as bad as the plane doing it. So I don't want to. I'm trying not to make this complicated, and I hope everybody's sort of following, but I'm going to copy that shape, and we don't want that curve anymore, and I'm going to feed that into the initial input here. So we've got this curve coming in. I'm going to ignore that. Let's add a new curve and put this one in. So now both the position and the scale should both be kind of getting the effect very quickly. And we've even got this little bit of a transition. So I wonder how small we can make that. I'm going to say 0.01. And yeah, that's going to eat up even more. And now we get this very sharp where it's getting applied very quickly. And now, because that's very quickly getting applied, I don't think we need to be as high. That can transition quicker. And actually, it's a pretty big jump. I guess we still want that transition. But why? Why are we still seeing a little bit of fade out here? This is with virtually no fade out. If I were to grab this and drag it all the way to the left, oh, yeah, suddenly everything gets affected. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I can't go all the way to the left, but and this is, oh, this is a transition. Yes. Okay. I understand. See you, Crossfader. This point is beginning here, but then this one is at 0, but slowly transitioning between those two. So this point doesn't begin until 0.001. I actually want this bottom one to also not begin until 0.001. There we go. Ha, I knew we could get it. So that's suddenly going to pop up into there. Now, do we actually want it to pop in there? Potentially, I want a little burst right there at the beginning, but we just need to make it a lot weaker. Like it should do a burst in the beginning, so it's a very harsh transition. But it shouldn't be that much, like 0.5. So yeah, it's all and then boom. So it's a bit of a jump right on the pop, and then it will continue from there. Nice. Now, random. We want these to travel further, I think, but I'm still a little thrown off by the spread here. I'm not sure. Like we still get that arc, and I am not introducing that arc. Yeah, I'm not super sure about that. But now this is now affecting simultaneously the position and the rotation. I'm going to go really mild on this forward and back. Actually, that's kind of weird. If we look at straight, okay, here's what I'm looking at. Do you see how these are like actually pretty far ahead? And then now I've got my X down to 0. So those shouldn't be moving forward at all. So why are they? I mean, it seems to be like these, those are causing it, but is one of the orientations wrong? If I say 0 there, that seems fine. Or at 55, and let's try that on Z. Oh, Z seems, was I doing the wrong two numbers? Was it supposed to be that was big and that was big? No, those are going super far forward now. What am I What am I doing wrong here? Why do those seem to travel forward? I mean, but that's X. That is potentially X. So if I say no movement on X, then yeah, that's fine. But now movement on Y, what is movement on Y doing specifically? I feel like our axes are not. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so this is maybe another reason why it threw me off, because I'm just changing Y, and Y seems to be local. So now it's taking their Y position and traveling them out on Y. And that is definitely not what we want. So the transform space is currently node. I'm going to set that to the effector. And now you can see that it's actually traveling straight up and straight down, which is what was expected. And now we can take that same number, which is a little too big, 222 will be fine. And now we go to Z, and we put that in there as well. There we go. So now it's spreading out in those two directions, and you see it's not moving forward because it's now looking at the transform space as this axis and not local to its individual polygon. Okay, cool. And then we've got the issue of rotation. Hopefully these are not, I mean, I want to see how these spin. Like, they don't seem like they spin that much until they get out here. So we still get this curve, which is interesting. So I'm going to temporarily turn off position. And then let's see, we've got the not very much rotation in the beginning. I feel like we're not getting that much rotation ever, but maybe once it gets to a certain point, it just is complete randomness. It's even difficult. It's difficult to look through one side. Maybe we should be on the inside looking through like this. But you know, maybe these are relatively small numbers because it's taking the entire transition to get there. So if I say 720 to double these, yeah, these definitely feel a little more. They're spinning up more. They definitely hit a critical point right there. I don't know. I don't know for sure. So, okay, that's position, or that's rotation, and we turn the position back on, and those two should work together. And these are popping. And then we can go back to the plane, which is just merely scaling it down. And that is fine. But I think this one, we do want to go into the curve and do its own little shrink a little bit quicker, because I don't want them to be all giant full-sized over there. I want them to quickly shrink down, and then they can do this pop. Now, we might want to shrink them down more, but I think we might actually finally kind of be at the shape I want to. Those are spreading out nicely, and they'll just fade away to nothing. We could change the overall transition easily enough. We haven't looked at the reference in a little bit, but it does seem like some of them can live for quite some time. We're kind of leaving all of them to continue instead of like maybe some of them would go, they'd randomly disappear more. There's probably ways of doing that, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So let's just see what this overall effect is looking like. Give it a save. Like, I like that we went down the vertex map route, but I can't help but think there was a cleaner way to do that. Oh, that looks pretty great. We got the imperfections on the line. It suddenly turns into a bubble. It implies a final one. We get that really hard edge right there. And then finally, all the little pieces will go away. Perfect. I mean, it perfectly dissolves away there. I like the way that they're spreading out. We had very nice control over the way those are bursting. Actually, I still wouldn't mind adding a little bit of the X, some position here on X. I just don't want it to be so much that they suddenly pop forward, and it might not take very much before they do. I'm gonna try 55, and let's see. No, because it does get applied later, and I feel like this isn't overly doing it. And I do like the idea of, it's not too bad. Like, I want them to be able to move forward and backward a little bit, and that seems okay. It's hard to tell if that is helping or not. Now I'm using a lighter touch on that. The the randomness is being it's getting that initial strength right away, and that goes back to I don't like us going back and forth. It makes us very unclear, but we're still doing this thing where it's initially getting that value very quickly, and that's immediately pushing the position out. And there's definitely a level in which I don't like that. So if we were to get rid of that, then yeah, that's going to kill off the way the position was dealing with it. But the randomness, you know, what's actually funny is what I would like it to do is scale down, start rotating, but don't move. And the only way to do that would be to split the random into two parts. So you take random position and then random rotation. And they're both being fed the exact same thing. And now on position, I'll turn off rotation. On rotation, I'll turn off position. And let's make sure that our polyfx is being fed both. I'm going to make sure the rotation comes in before the position, I believe. And everything's getting everything applied with this little bump. But if do we take the bump and move it somewhere else? Maybe. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to copy the shape, turn it off. So now it's back to being flat. Now we go back into the plane and we remap it. We're already remapping that one, but we need is a second curve. We already got some here, so I'll steal one. Move that here. It calculates beforehand because that's the way it would have been fed before, and paste in that same shape. So that should hopefully introduce the it suddenly scales down. Cool. That's what we're going for. And then inside of, I guess it's moved over 0.1. Is that the problem? I mean, I think it's a cool effect. That's why I'm spending so much time on it. But the problem is I moved these both over a tiny amount, and maybe both of them shouldn't have been moved over at all, or the whole thing should have been over and suddenly gotten affected. Like, does that make sense maybe? If I delete, but we pull it out of the vertex map. And I want to move these all over the place. It makes them get lost. I'm hitting undo a few times. Okay, we're back to this curve being in this one, not in them individually. So if I delete that, everything, oh, that's why we did that. Everything gets affected. Otherwise, you can't have it immediately affected. Okay, at least there was a rhyme. There's a reason to the madness. Now, actually, I don't know if this will work, but I have one more thought, which is right now we kind of said, okay, very harsh line. I'm curious, this will involve time, so I'll have to play through a little bit more cleanly. But if we put it to K, you can actually put it to K and doing a little bit of smooth or linearing, and we're talking small amounts, is going to make it. So you see how this is, with virtually no smoothing, that this is boom getting affected in a big way. But as I add the smoothing, it's actually going to smooth out that very harsh curve and be like, no, chill before you get into that state. Now, my only question is that, that's having a big effect on the final one. I don't know. I guess I don't want to spend a lot more time on this one. So I think I'm going to say that is good enough. The harsh edge is good. I would like to do the rotation, the position. Those two are separate. And we did split them apart, and they are still fed in now separately, I do believe. Yeah, they're fed in, so it's doing the same thing. We did separate them, so we could do different curves if we want to. Yeah, so there's that. Now, these are currently very triangular. They're triangles, which is fine. It might be a little dangerous, but I'm going to drop this entire thing into a subdivision surface, which happens after everything else. So what's going to happen is you can see that this is going to essentially round out these edges a little bit. It's hard to see, but they become these shapes instead of that harsher shape. So they're smoother. And maybe more importantly, you can see our little bubble highlight catchers have become very tiny and a little bit more rounded. And there's this little moment where when they suddenly move from the surface, they're suddenly going to get that little extra pop of getting rounded. And I think that them being round is going to be a good thing. Now that's going to create quite a few extra polygons. They're not going to be more polygons for the purposes of doing all the simulation calculation stuff. They come after the fact, but it's a thing. So yeah, that's going to travel back very imperfect there. Now, I guess the last step would be, let's see if we can, I'll even use the vanilla cinema renderer and see if we can catch some highlights like we are here. You get these nice little glints. Could be tough, but let's see. And I mean, the render might take forever. Spatten, you are right. We could put it in a cloth surface and give them thickness as well. But then we can't use the Cinema 4D thin shell. It would actually be double walled thickness. I am intrigued by the idea. It does seem a little dangerous, but let's see what we can do. So we don't use color, but we do use transparency, and it's glass. Let's just set it to water. Actually, there's, well, vegetable oil would be, I don't, yeah, if it's a soap bubble, is it more like a vegetable oil or more like water? I don't know the index of refraction of a bubble. I'm not going to Google it. Now it's additive. Yeah, we don't want additive. What we do want would be thin walled, but there's no, is there no thin walled in cinema? I've been doing so little rendering that I've actually kind of forgotten that. So maybe adding thickness in there would be appropriate, because let's just do this. We'll apply the material, and we're going to need something to reflect. I'm going to use a Grayscale Gorilla HDR, but you can just use any HDR. In fact, I'll do this in the not plug-in-y way too much by just using the browser to find an HDR. So I'm just going to make a luminant material. And I'm merely doing this to save a couple clicks. You don't need a plugin. Just in your Luminance channel, feed in an HDR. But I do have a plugin that's going to allow me to find them quickly. So I'm going to say I want HDR link. It is going to control the color channel there. And now I have quick access to this browser. It's just quicker than going into the Finder. So let's show all. And I'm actually going to go to one of my old favorites, which is going to be Botanical Gardens 1, because that gives some very bright reflections, but there's also reflections everywhere. And then, okay, cool. And then I might go back to using that, but I could just delete that and it wouldn't do anything anymore. Render tags, compositing tag. They changed the icon for compositing. I thought it was just used to be orange. So I don't want to see it by the camera, but it will be seen by transparency. So if I were to hit render right now, we get that, which is kind of what I was expecting. So now we're going to go with Spatten's idea, which is to give this some thickness. A little dangerous. I'm going to turn off the subdivision surface and hold down Alt while I create a cloth surface. And I don't want any subdivisions from the cloth, but I do want a thickness. Now, how tiny? Well, but the thickness is dangerous because it still exists all the way through to the end, and there's no way to stop that from happening, really. And then the only thought I suddenly had that might be able to make it almost completely disappear is really dangerous. But for a temporary thing, I don't know how big these triangles are. I'm going to say 1, and let's just see what it gives us. Yeah, okay, 1 is not insane. You can see there's a little bit of thickness there. So we don't want much. In fact, I'm going to say 0.2, very thin. So now these actually have some thickness, which should make the refraction behave very differently, although it's not. Or is it? Maybe it is. Well, let me do a couple things. First of all, the reflection is coming through as a specular. I don't want that. Let's remove that. Add a Beckman with no specular and no roughness. Okay, so it just becomes shiny and cool. Render that. Why is it still? Maybe just the HDR is blurry there. Reflection. There's the transparency layer. Maybe we don't need that at all. Maybe it's just this transparency layer, and that has the roughness. So there we go. Sorry about that. There, nice and shiny there. Now, okay, that's actually working. So well, let me show you the difference. I'm going to turn on, let's see if there is a difference, actually. I'm going to turn off the thin wall, and let's see. Do you see how this is behaving like this is a solid sphere of glass, essentially? And so look at the way we're seeing through the object. But if I turn on this very, very thin wall, we're literally giving it some thickness. Wait, is there a difference there? Maybe I'm going crazy. Because of the way we're breaking this. I'm having trouble telling if there's thickness to it or not. I mean, it looks pretty cool one way or the other. Let's turn on the subdivision surface. There's going to be quite a few polygons here, but that's fine. It won't play back very well, but it won't add too much to our render time. Now, if we're going to make this render properly, see, these are actually going to have a lot more trouble catching a little glint because we're making them so rounded. I actually think we're going to catch better glints if it's not subdivision surfaced. Yeah, see, there's more of a highlight that can happen. Let's see. Yeah, I agree. Pro Tools, we could do an A/B. An A/B test on it, but I don't want to. I'm really more concerned with. Can we put this in a? The reference is kind of like just this psych type of setup. So can we do that if we, what's the best way to do this? I mean, I can literally use a psych. This is not a big part of this. I'm just trying to think of the simplest way to do certain things here because I don't want to make anything more complex than we have to, but if we were, let's just make the quickest psych imaginable just so we can emulate the situation that we're finding ourselves in here. So we got all these subdivisions. It's not a ton. Make a bend deformer. Put it in the plane. Hit R for rotate. Hold down Shift as I spin. I missed it. Whoop. It's being tricky. Right handle. Spin. Actually, I guess it's giving me that little blip of lag because we got such a complex scene. So that was my bad. 90 degrees. Now I can say fit to parent. With it fit to parent, we can make it not as tall on Y. Let's say 200. Give it a strength of 90. An angle of -90. And now we've got an instant, very simple psych. I'm just going to brute force this a little bit. We've got 48 height segments and 1 width segment. T for scale. Scale, scale, scale. World's simplest curvy psych. Generic grayish material on it, but we still have a reflection that can catch. Now I'm going to pop open the HDRs and let's get something that's a little more studio-like. They actually don't work too well in reflections, but I still think Pro Studio's metal is going to give us kind of these very bright areas, and there's some dark areas, some bright areas. So I'm going to try Studio 30. And let's see what we get. Well, not unreasonable. I'm going to spin the sky. Let's see if we can get a better angle. This is where the third-party renderers would be helping because you'd be getting great feedback on these. Now, okay, so some issues I might be seeing right away. First of all, is it doing that render thing? You said we're getting little, these are quite dark. It seems strange to me. I would only imagine they'd be dark if we were seeing through multiple, like a lot of layers of transparency, and we've probably got the default of, I forget if it's 3, 4, or 5, but in any case, they should be able to see through those, unless these are like overlapping each other and they suddenly become dark. Just for a point of clarity, I'm going to double check. So under options, we've got our ray depth, our reflection depth, and array depth. Actually, they seem to have increased the default, so I'm pretty confident that this should be fine. If I increase that, I don't think it takes too much longer to render. And you see that they're still there white, or there's still these dark little spots on them. So I'm not so certain about those. But you do see that we are getting these tiny little highlights occasionally, like that are definitely brighter than the overall environment. But they're also darker than the overall environment. And here, they're never darker. You see, they're just catching a little bit of extra, like, glinty highlight. Now, that does mean there is a super duper bright highlight that things are catching. So in spite of us having the HDR, it does make me want to maybe add in a very bright shape that it can see. So I'm going to make a disk shape target. I'll target the sky, so it's targeting the 0, 0, 0. And now, if I were to move this and make the orientation Z plus, it should look right at the center point. Make a new material. It will be illuminant, and it's going to be super bright, 1000 bright. Excellent. Now, I'm going to place it in the position I think is going to give us the best highlights. And then I'm going to create a null. And if we need to, I'm going to scale this null. And the null is at 0, 0, 0. So when I scale it, that will keep getting further and further and bigger and bigger. But let's just see what that does first. I'm not going to make the sky not render. So now we're just seeing what highlight this gives us. So getting a couple little speckly highlights. Also, this refraction just does not seem right to me. We got to look into that some more. I'm going to add another 0 to our brightness. So I'm probably going overboard, but it's going to make it so it's like if it's highlighting, it is highlighting. Then I wonder if, I mean, if this is being told not to render the back, I'm going to say go ahead and render in the background, because maybe it's not refracting it then. No, it's still not sure why we're getting these darker ones, because we should be seeing either the environment or the ground. Now, we don't have GI, so is there like a lot of darkness there on the ground? If I just make a light, it doesn't change it. So yeah, I'm not sure where those dark ones come from, but yeah, it could be a physical renderer thing. It could be something I'm just missing. So we're catching some highlights, but not that many. P for scale. Whee! Interesting. Does cinema have a thin wall? I guess I was kind of saying it before, and I don't think anybody took me up on it. Isn't exit reflections not a thing? I think that's it makes them look shinier, but it's not actually real. Just checking if anybody has anything regarding here. Probably refractions, yeah. Yeah, let me think. So those pop, they go out. We're not catching these highlights. They get darker at the same time they get lighter. That's what's throwing me off here. If these were just like tiny little glints that could be highlighted, then that'd be fine. We turn off the cloth surface for a moment. Yeah, there's just thin, and there's definitely a difference where this feels like, I'm going to turn off the poly effects. You can see right here, this looks like a blob of floating water. I think if we were to turn on the cloth surface, that feels more like a bubble. Yeah, this feels like a bubble. That feels like a ball of water. So there is definitely a difference. Now, there are dark places that could be catching dark reflections. Could that be it? That there's places that are, like we were saying, hey, there's a place that's lighter than everywhere else. But now we're also saying, hey, there's a place that's darker than everywhere else. Is that what's maybe causing us trouble for those dark areas? I don't know. So let's try adding the compositing tag back in. And I'm going to say, I'm going to have it be, what's the best way to do this? You're kind of getting the reflections from there. Maybe we just don't have the sky, and then we get that gray, and now I create a new sky, and we just apply the same gray that the cyc has. And now no point ever really goes black. It just goes to like these darker grays. And if I make a plane, yeah, if I make a light, then now we're illuminating the cyc more. So now we're in a world where there's no real dark colors. So if that's the case, and we give it some thickness and we hit render, then this should look more like a bubble, which is doing perfectly fine. It probably would be a good idea to add in some thin-walled reflection. Now in the transparency channel, I don't think it allows you to. If we turn off transparency-based reflection and we turn on a regular Beckman, does it add to it? Seemingly no. So where do we add the thin? Where do you add the thin shader? Or I guess you can roughness, color, bump, exit color. But yeah, you can't. The exit color doesn't have one. So I'm completely blanking. Somebody who knows this, thin wall. We have the thin. Yeah, thin wall. Somebody's saying that might only be in the third-party renders. And I'm misremembering them, but we do have the thin film shader. What layer am I supposed to put that in? Is it I would think it'd be in the reflection layer, possibly the color layer, but the color layer shouldn't come through. Like this color layer should do nothing when I turn it on and off, unless it's got a Fresnel thing going on. So we could put a Fresnel, and then the color channel becomes relevant. And actually, we wouldn't want color, maybe the luminance channel. In the luminance channel, we can put the thin film. I just forget the formula for that. I made a tutorial when it was new. I just don't remember. Bold and break. That's a good question. Let's deal with that first, though. The question is, what is exit reflection doing? Let's A/B test it and find out. So I don't need to save it, but I will send this to the picture viewer. And now we will go back to this, turn on exit reflections. Even here, you see there's a little highlight over there. And let's render, all right, let's send that to the picture viewer. And let's see. So that's the new one, and that's without. So you see that it's kind of creating this highlight on the edge. It's like if the inside can reflect, but I think that reality doesn't have that. I will say it does look a little cleaner. I mean, there's less of the bubble showing up. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad. You also get this highlight here. So I think it's like exit reflection is what it's doing, that this inside is not reflecting the internal side opposite it. I'm not 100% certain. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that helps or hurts, but going back to the thin film, I can turn on the luminance channel, and then in the transparency, we can add a Fresnel in. And now you can see that the transparency is having to come through. I can turn on physical, and I always think you have to turn on invert, and now we just get like a little bit on the edge. And now that just becomes visible, in which case the luminance channel can sneak through, and that might start giving us a little bit of color. I don't know if that helps or not. So now, now we turn back on our poly effects, rewind a little bit. Actually, we have to rewind all the way because, actually, I got really smooth and everything. I don't think I'd have to play through the entire time. Somewhere, we've got the freeze grow situation makes it so we have to play through. We can't just rewind. So we'll let that go a decent number of frames, and let's see if we've eliminated the little dark ones. I mean, I guess nothing here is going darker than any other part of it. They're certainly not like suddenly exploding out to this blue color as they go. If I turn on our subdivision surface, then it should round these all out a little bit. So they should be tiny little spheres almost, with some curvature to them. It's just making them completely disappear. I'm thinking that as the bubbles pop, it's not actually these tiny little particles. It's more like little strings are being left behind, like little wisps of water that are still connected to each other. So that could be a limitation of where we're ending up here. The subdivision surface is just certainly not helping at all. So this kind of effect is working all right for me. This Fresnel thing is just not working at all. Say additive, clear. Okay, apparently additive brings it in, but I don't know if that's right. It does get all kind of rainbowy, which is neat, but I don't know if that's actually something you'd want. That is adding on the luminance channel, so we could always pull back on the luminance channel. And now it's going to have less effects. We could have a little bit of rainbowiness in there if we wanted to. I don't think it's hurting anything, but maybe it was just like doing something like putting in the luminance channel and then turning on additive. I don't know. Okay, so now we don't have a very complex lighting. We just have this disc. I'm going to pull it higher up into the sky. We should be able to tell where it is via the reflection. It's actually, you have to usually put that almost directly overhead. And maybe even a little behind it. Yeah, reflections, you have to remember the way they bounce off from the camera's point of view. And now I'm actually scaling it up a lot. So let's see. Render. Yeah, a lot bigger. Yeah, it's bigger, and now you see there's more highlights as this is eating up a little bit more. It's super bright. And I wanted to see that. Is that an exit reflection? I think it might be. Exit reflection. Go. Nope, still there. Interesting. All right, well, I'll trust it right now. We're getting these little speckles, but it's probably that side reflecting those. That could be a result of me saying that this is like cartoonishly bright. So if I say, hey, you're bright, but you're not that bright. And then, that's not helping much, though. We get such pure circumstances. Yeah, I mean, it is. Those are these reflecting, but if I don't have that light be super bright, then they don't reflect. So this now taking those and refracting them back again. I'm not sure any way around that. Certainly that our reference did not have, like, that doesn't have a bunch of them. Well, I mean, I say that. It's hard to tell, but like, is there a particularly bright one here and it is catching it here? I'm not sure. I'll add a few extra segments to the disk. Is there anything left to do? We really should wrap this up and try and get in another question. These are, yeah, there's just something about the refraction. I mean, I didn't want to have to use a third-party renderer for this one, but we might have just been better off doing it that way. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Also, something I want to try is like, what happens if we add a lot more thickness, just for fun? So I'm going to make these like really thick, and I just want to see what that ends up looking like. Honestly, not terribly different. Super thick. Now I want to make it super thin, like 0.02, very, very, very thin. Well, it does, and now it's almost like we're only catching the highlights. There's not much left besides that as this travels in. It's too bad because there's a lot of interesting things that are happening here, but like you do have to think about this more like a liquid sim. We're treating it not like a liquid sim, but the question was like, you know, to do it non-dynamically, not simulated. And this is this edge is curling up, and we're not doing anything to get that curl, so we're not getting a nice highlight on the edge, which would be amazing if we were. I wonder if we could, like, what's the quickest way we can maybe fake that? I'm worried about doubling up displacements, but let's do it anyway. I'm going to add a second displacement, and this displacement, we'll do the simplest version. I'm just going to feed in the color white, so it's going to inflate the entire thing, and under fall off, drag in one of our vertex maps, and that's going to displace everything. Yeah, that's a bad idea. We could have it. Potentially, you could make a vertex map, remap it on an output, so it gets a little bit of a, like, it would fade up to yellow, fade back to red, and you can maybe get a little bit of a curve right there. That could be cool, but that's a huge rabbit hole that we're not going to go down now. And the reason not to is you see it's going to explode the volume of those individual parts that are flying out back there. So there's a lot of things that I just don't know how to account for. It could be limitations of the render. It could be me not doing it well. Because now we did change our setup and our lighting, and we got rid of the little black reflections and refractions, and now we're just getting these light colored ones, which is cool. That went a long way. But I could be doing something else that is making it so that we're not catching that, you know, these reflections going back onto the inside, like, not so great. I'm not certain what to do about those. So let's send this out to the renderer and get ready to tackle another question. Output, that's fine. Fine resolution. It's going to be chugging for a little bit, so maybe I'll try and answer some questions that aren't like inside of Cinema so we can officially come back to this one. It is kind of just hanging there for a second, so hopefully that will wake up. Back to the chats. Thanks everybody for the contributions as I'm going. I try and make the segments be where I'm really mostly just focused on the project and not constantly jumping back. I mean, it's fun to watch a streamer who's like playing a video game and interacting with the chat in a way. But here, if it's like, it's on YouTube, it's like a whole bunch of time saying like, oh, hi Digital Donut in the middle of it would be taking away from its educational value a little bit, I think. Or that's my theory. Hello from Colombia. Hi, Eder. Use a like slight, nothing is, actually, that's a fair point. Nothing is 100% transparent. So using like 95% transparency might have been the way to get a little bit of thin film in there. Now, hopefully it's still, it seems to still be streaming, but Cinema has not woken up. So I just hit the render button and now it's like, nope, I'm not doing it. So it's possible that Cinema froze just hitting that. I mean, it did say all frames, so that should automatically rewind, run from the beginning. I'm going to give it a minute to keep on trying to figure itself out, and otherwise I'm going to force quit. I don't think we lost too much except for the render settings. Let's see. Dean, that Redshift would handle it a lot better. I would make that assumption as well, but I was trying to do that one without third-party renders because it was cool. So that's, the distance we went into it was cool, but I didn't want to lose it. Is VDB usable in Cinema 4D R18? No, VDB was introduced in R20, not back in R18. Sadly. Now somebody could do a VDB, export as Alembic or something, and then you could import that, but you can't use the tools directly in R18. Let's see, I'm checking out type.questions. Question, is there a way to do a smooth group in C4D like in 3D Studio Max? A smooth group. I don't know 3D Studio Max well enough to know what a smooth group does. So, sorry, I don't know. Cinema's still not waking up, so I'm going to force quit it, and we'll see what we lost. Task Manager, Cinema 4D, dead. Open. If somebody can clarify what a smooth group is in 3D Studio Max, I could say, see if we have an equivalent. Otherwise, Jezebel Bing Bong. Jezebel Bing Bong. Nice. I guess Jezebel and Jezebella, very important to distinguish between those two. So apologies. How do you get soft body animation and then have animation like a bird flapping its wings and then animate its trajectory around the scene? Ooh, you want to animate a bird's wings with soft body? That seems detailed. I go back to screen share and then we'll see about tackling things. It probably doesn't remember the project. Oh, it does. Usually when you force quit, how much did we lose here? This can't be the last one we had. Open project. Oh, no, maybe it was. Wow. Apparently I hadn't saved in quite some time because we're back to pre-thickness and pre any of the lighting or anything. So that's kind of on me. And because we force quit, I don't know if there's a recovery scene. There might be. But I'm just going to, I guess here, let's just render this out to viewport and see what that looks like. All frames, hardware renderer. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. If we put a really sharp highlight on it, I'll just do that. Reflect. Specular strength will be very high. Width will be very low. Inner width. There we go. just a bright highlight. So that should make that just a little more sparkly. Yeah, now you can see we get little glints in there, so it's something. And now we'll send that out to the picture viewer. Whee! Oh, why did it start? Well, weird. We started at 0, but you see it's already super popped. So it looks like I'm going to call that a bug in Cinema because we have to rewind and then send it to the picture viewer. And even though it's rendering from 0 to 1, it didn't like it. Maybe that when I hit play, when I hit render, we weren't at the time of 0. I wonder if that actually had some sort of effect on that same thing. But let's just see how the kind of overall popping effect looked in closer to real time. I mean, we didn't lose the animation. We just lost all the rendering stuff. Wee. Wee. And gone. Stop rendering. We're losing frames. All right, let's see how well we can cache it. I forgot this hardware render really eats up the RAM, so you don't have that much playback. And even this, it's not recaching it very much. I'm not sure what the deal is there. Like, why do we... If I render this out, we'd have so much longer of a cache. I've never understood that. And stop. I mean, it's supposed to be in slow motion. So, if it wasn't in slow motion, we'd have... I don't know. I don't know. Just a theory. Let's see. I haven't forgotten about the bird flapping questions. Just a bell bing bong. Yeah. Okay, you're now saying like just it could also be an IK rig. IK rig would totally be the way to do it. There's an old, super old live stream pre-Rocket Lasso where I made flapping wings, and it was pretty quick. And I don't want to spend really much time here, but you could get. I mean, it seems like you want dynamic flapping wings. There's a lot of things you could do. What's the best way to go about talking about it? I mean, you could just do IK. I mean, you could do IK with keyframes. You could do soft IK, or not. Yeah, you could do like dynamic IK and allow that to figure itself out. You could do it entirely dynamically. You could do it dynamically with motors. You could do it with soft body, but I don't think I don't know. I don't think you do soft body. Maybe there might be some little way of doing a soft body, but that seems dangerous. What I kind of want to do a rigid body version here just for a moment. Just like I said the last one. Well, actually, I don't think I said the bubble would be quick. I said the one before the bubble would be quick. All right, so I'm going to start out with just this shape, and this is, let's say this is the first part of a wing, and we're going to make a kind of a wing skeleton. So, simulation collider body. This one has to be a collider body. Let's copy and paste and scoot it over, and I very precisely made that 100 wide. And now this one, I'm going to say dynamic on. So this one is a dynamic body, so it should fall. Whee! So with that being the case, this one isn't going anywhere, which means we can keyframe it. Now we need to connect these somehow. I'm going to connect it with a hinge. So under simulate, okay, make sure I'm showing the right screen. Under simulate dynamics, we make a connector. This connector will move over, I think, 100, apparently 50 units. We'll move it over 50 units, which should be right in the middle. And I want it to connect. I'll put it visually between the two. I want to connect from the base to this tip of the wing. Actually, this is the base. Base 1. That's fine. If I play, it should go here. Cool. Now, so that is a very basic hinge. Some things we can do. We can put an angular limit on it. And oh man, we did spend a lot of time in the bonus live stream, which happens on Thursdays. If you support on Patreon, there's a bonus stream. We're trying to figure out very, very, very specific things. But we are figuring out how these little blocker things went. But I'm going to just do a random get. No. You see how the wedge is over on that side? So I think that's the valid place. So we need to open up this like Pac-Man mouth over here. So it's kind of like, see, that's like the tongue, and that's the Pac-Man mouth. And this can move up and down inside the Pac-Man mouth. So if I play, it's going to go bonk, and then it gets stopped. So that's as far as that wing could go. So we've just kind of put a limit so it doesn't go insane. We could make the limits a lot bigger if we wanted to as well. Now, what I would really like to do is put a rotational spring on here. I got to tell you, though, I am not an expert on rotation-based springs. So let's see how this goes. Spring, connect the base to the first part of the wing, and it should pivot from 50 units over. And it's not a linear spring, it's an angular spring. You see, the angular spring is trying to spin it in a particular orientation. So if I hit play, that's going to fall, but yeah, okay, that's working okay. You see how the spring is saying, no, don't rotate. I want you to stay here, but you're allowed to wiggle. Now we got control here as far as stiffness, so I could put 10 stiffness, and it's really going to want to be there. And this kind of becomes our rig. I say 1 for now, and we'll start changing them as we go. Okay, so that is kind of wing tip 1. We'll just make a few of these. So I'm going to duplicate. Actually, yeah, I'll just duplicate. I think that'll work. And I'm going to hold down shift as I move it over, and this should go in a nice clean 50 units, or it'll be every 50. So now it's at 200. That should have there be no overlap. Oops, I wanted that one. Yep. It's like, what did I do wrong there? So this is now 2, and these scoot over, and they scoot over 100 units. There we go. Neat. Now I can grab both the spring and the connector at the same time, which is pretty cool. And you saw I put it starts on one, ends on the other, so I can grab both of those and say it starts on one, goes to the other. So now we should just have copied that entire rig to a second bit of wing, and now you see that can bend. We'll do 1 more of these. I wonder if these should be children of the piece that comes before it. I'm not 100% sure if that makes a difference, but that's going to at least make that visually move with it, which at least is visually helpful. So now we're going to copy and paste the final one, move it over another 50. Oh, I guess 100 units. These springs jump onto that one. This copy of the object is redundant. I'll delete that one. And this becomes piece number 3. These connectors go from the start to the finish. And now we should have 3 wing segments. I'm going to shrink them just to distinguish them a little bit visually. And let's put a color in there. Let's make it's a robin, so it'll be nice and bright red. Okie dokie. Hit play. Blup, blup, blup. Now, so now they have an orientation preference. Now, if this is the bird's wing, gravity technically could do something. But I think for our purposes, like a bird's wing isn't being held down by gravity. Like it's not drooping because of gravity. So I'm just going to turn off gravity. Let's just say that's not a variable here. Although, actually, I'm going to leave it on for a moment so we can figure out these springs first. So you see these all are going to flop over, but I'm going to grab the 3 springs and we'll see if giving a stiffness of 10 is enough to try and make them. Actually, that's pretty good. That's working way better than I thought it would. So you see, this is actually trying to stop them from bending down. That's very good. Now, we could turn off gravity, which is going to stop them from having an inclination to bend it down. That will mean they won't move at all, so the spring's not helping too much. But now we start setting up our first bit of animation. I'm going to create a null and scoot it 50 units over and move it to the bottom of our hierarchy. This hierarchy is actually backwards from what I would usually do. I kind of want, I guess there's no reason not to. It'll be base and then 1 and then 2 and then 3. There, that's just, my brain sees that more as like the default. So nothing has changed. If I play, that should all be good. Yeah, there's no gravity, so it doesn't even fall. Let's save this. This will be dynamic bird wing. So very simple chain linked up here, and we're using springs in order to make them want to go back to their first position. Now, this is the complete perfect opportunity to use Signal, a plugin that I developed for Grayscale Gorilla. Let's do it without a plugin just to start. So let's see what the rotation should be. It's going to be on B. So it is going to look completely broken when we do these keyframes, but start at 0 because it is linked to all these at 0. We have to keyframe at 0. But now let's go forward 10 frames, and at 10 frames, let's have rotated this up. I don't know, let's say 35. We'll keyframe that, and then we'll give it double that length of time. So it's 10, so we want double that. So I'm going to say 30, and we'll have it rotated down to a negative 30. So it's just going to do that. Now, just by having done those 2 keyframes, I should be able to play, and we're going to say go up and down. Now we need to create this into some sort of looping animation, but we do have to start at 0. And this is once again where Signal would come in. What did I just do? Oh, I didn't rewind. Okay. So how do if we turn on a loop, it's going to loop at the first keyframe as well. So for our purposes, it's not terribly difficult just to make a duplicate of those. And then let's give ourselves a few extra frames. We don't need this loop for too long. I'll grab those and duplicate them again. I just drag the time instead of the keyframes. Select those. Drag, hold down Control. It's very difficult to aim for that tiny little part. I do that all the time. There we go. So 20 frames in between each of those. So now we should get a couple of flaps out of this thing. So flap, flap, flap. Now, I mean, what's cool about this, actually, I do like that. Let's keep going a little bit further. We'll grab the null. We can call this the animate wing. For things we're going to do, it's really easy to make this longer. Even this very manual way of doing it, we can duplicate again. It's actually a little hard to see where that's starting. Good enough. There might be a little bit of time discrepancy there, but that's fine. I just want to move on to some other parts of this one. Okay, so we should get a couple extra flaps out of this thing. Flap, flap. And so it's just going to keep on going. Now, what's cool about this is how we did all that work. So now from this point forward, we get all this movement from the wings for free. That just kind of comes with what's coming from the base motion. So there are a couple of cool advantages to this. One is going to be, I'm going to create another null, and we'll just call this wing. We're going to select all, deselect the null, and make these all a child of the wing. And then I'm going to grab all of these and scoot them over 100 units. And I'm going to create let's see, what should our bird shape be? Let's just make a capsule. And we'll make it a little bit longer here, and it needs a beak. So we'll make a cone. There we go. Perfect bird. And then we can copy the cone over here. And there we got perfect tail. Lovely. All right, so we're going to just make these children of the capsule. We'll call that the body. I'm going to hit Alt-G, which will put into a null at 0, 0, 0. Well, just because it's at 0, 0, 0. So, and this will also be the body null. So with all of that in mind, we put the wing up into the body null, and now we've got a wing, and that's going to be doing its flapping. Flap. All right, and now let's make a duplicate, and we could mirror it, but I'm going to actually make a duplicate of the wing. Actually, something might be smart. I don't know if this is necessary, but I'm going to copy and paste the wing, and that's just to guarantee that it's going to guarantee that the links are maintained properly, and it's not remembering the external link. Now the wing is pivoting from the center point. We offset it correctly. So if I spin that 180, that should be all I have to do. And now we've got two wings that are both going to do the same motion. Now here's where things can get kind of fun is we've got the body here, and anywhere we move this null, everything else is going to be forced to update. I'm going to save it. If we hit play, I should be able to grab this and move it. But if I were to like move this quickly, you see the wings are actually going to react to that. This is all dynamic. So it's going to be cleaner if I keyframe it. But you see if I move this, that wing motion is affected. Wee, wee, wee. So it's kind of like, we keyframed it, but that's almost like a motor that's driving the base motion. But these are all just reacting to forces as they're in the scene. So we get a lot of extra motion automatically. So I'm going to add a vibrate tag, turn on. Let's see if we can do a regular pulse if we get anything interesting. So I'm going to have it move up and down. Once again, the signal would be great for this, but I'm going to do this manually. So it's going to, not sure. We didn't time it perfectly, so this is going to get out of sync quickly. But yeah, you see as this is moving up and down that the dynamics might be affected. If I make this go 5 times as fast, the wings are definitely being affected. So, that's fun. And then you could put some rotation on there. Not that rotation. Let's do, essentially that rotation. Slow down there, birdie. And so there's a little bit of extra something or other moving in there. And so now it's dynamic and moving around. Now, the obvious next step here would be to have it travel some sort of path. I guess a flower is the most basic shape that we can travel down that actually gives us some sort of curvy detail. We'll do 5 petals, lay it flat on the ground, T for scale. And there we go. That's got the path for the bird. Currently, this vibrate tag is taking over a lot of the information. So I'm actually going to group that and make sure that this is at the time of 0, that this is zeroed out, which it is. Let's make sure that this is also zeroed out. Cool. And now this is also going to be, this is just, body. Let's say body spline. Because this gets added to an animation. Align the spline. The spline is the flower. The motion is position at 0. And I don't know how quick this is going to be. So let's go all the way to the end and go all the way to the end. It's going to look weird, but let's rewind, hit play. And it's also, it's going backwards for one. That's fine. Let's reverse the spline. We can't reverse the spline for a very good reason, because it's going to change the initial dynamic position. We have to be careful about doing that. We can do it. We just have to do a time of 0. There we go. But this still might go backwards. No, it goes forward now. Okay, it's going to go forward. Actually, it might not after I turn on the very important tangential. And it's going to travel backwards. So that's just the nature of that beast. So easy enough to invert at the time of the very ending. Keyframe at the time of the very beginning. 100%. And now we rewind, and it's there. And now it should at least travel the correct direction. It's pretty slow, but it's also it's a spline interpolation. So if I select all the keyframes, I can change that to linear. And now let's see, this is what the real speed is. Yeah, which is actually pretty good. So now we've got our kind of silly dancing bird. It's traveling the path, but it's also got our vibrate tag. So it's getting a little bit of random rotation. But you can see its wings reacting to that extra bit of motion. Now, obviously, we need to make 2 birds and have them fight. So let's make this fully dynamic, which should be fun. I don't know how well that will work. We'd have to do several things to make that work. The wings will collide, but the body won't. But if they're fully dynamic, and then the does that make maybe they don't have to be fully dynamic. If this is the body and we make the wings children of the wing. Oh, and we should probably make the very important. Let's make the body and the tails correct. We need a beak color. We're going for accuracy here, everybody. Orangey, little orangey yellow. Perfect photorealistic beak right there. Excellent. And okay, so if we make the body a rigid body, and I want to be very careful here and say, don't apply the tag to the children. And if I play, the hope is it's just going to fall. It fell kind of weird. Yeah, that might be trouble. So there's definitely reasons for this. First of all, it's being told to do all this motion. So if we pull it out, it might fall a little bit more cleanly. But you can see it's definitely doing some weird things. And there are good reasons for that, which is like these are not part of the dynamic simulation, but the wings are going where the parent went, but they are not dynamic objects. So a lot of this goes to, I don't know, you'd have to build more complicated rigs for that to happen. I just really wanted a bunch of birds crashing into each other. And I can't think of any way to doing that without completely rebuilding the rig. So maybe we just make a flock of them and their wings should still collide. It would take too long to rebuild the entire rig too. Oh no, okay. I thought I broke the bird, but he's fine. Oh no, but his tail feather has the color. Okay, so that should be fine. So you got a nice bird flapping around. Now, what would be the best way to create a flock of these all doing the same motion? You make a cloner, but you'd have to clone the spline along with it. That's not necessarily wrong. If we do that, I'm curious, because the spline won't render, make a cloner, put the entire rig into a cloner. We get 3 birds. If I just hit play, will this just work? Is the first question. Oh, okay. Yeah, seems to. Now, those are all keyframed. So if I were to add a effector, a random effector, and I don't want to randomize the position, but I do want to randomize the time offset. So if I were to say, hey, you've got a little bit of time offset here, does that filter through? Seemingly no. Sadly not. Now, I'm pretty sure things do clone dynamically. So if we just clone a bunch of those, and I think we need to get rid of our align the spline tag. So these should all be doing their thing, flapping around. You see they're all doing different dynamic simulations. They're not identical. And actually did that. Is the time offsetting on here? No, those are all, they start out the same, but then they maybe collide with each other. They start getting different motion. So the wings are still dynamic, but then we need these to be, can we just clone them onto the spline? Set that to object, and the object will be the flower, and now we get a bunch of birds, and then we set a rate, and now there I'll be, whoa, negative rate. Sorry, birds. Okay, calm down, birds. Rewind. Okay. Now, this is interesting. Do you see how they're like doing a little burst of speed on these in-between points? And it's because it doesn't interpret the spline as a... How do we even fix... It's not interpreting the spline as a constant rate, and it's because we're set to adaptive. I think if we set this to uniform... There we go. As soon as we set that to uniform, the spline is being interpreted to be uniform. And now you can see that they will travel at a constant rate now. Let's see. I'm not sure where to go with this without... I mean, we can't break it too much because it's not fully dynamic. So when you just make a bunch of these, it's starting to slow down because there's a lot of clones and connectors now. Look at the stuttering as they turn. It seems interesting. 1 bird per vertex. Oh, you can't do a rate when it's a bird. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Even. Well, that seems smoother. There's the same count of birds, but if I set it to even, it's going faster. It's not being so... No, I guess it still is jittery. Yeah, drop it to 10. They move nice and fast. Yeah, I'm not really sure where to go with it, except that we've kind of got dynamic birds. Now, one thing I will point out is we get... you're going to see that some of the wings might break because it does a turn that's a little too fast for the dynamics to handle. They might start separating, and when they start separating, they might stay separated. You see on that one, his wing is quite broken. So, but you'll see in the beginning that it should be correct. It doesn't break for a while. Now, a couple ways potentially to fix this. In fact, if this works, then this is an important tidbit. Is something I've been finding is springs and connectors are heavily affected by the mass of the object. So if I make the mass, I don't know if this will happen, but if I make the mass 1/10 of what it currently is, so a custom density, instead of world density of 0.1, then they're all a lot weaker. And I think it means the springs have more control. I want to see if the wing is no longer broken. I'm trying to see which wing would have which bird has a broken wing. Oh, that one's still pretty broken right there. Yeah, that is getting pretty broken. I wonder if this will work at all. So I'm gonna make it as tiny density as possible. In the beginning, they're fine. Does that still break? It might. This has an effect on other things, but it might not have an effect on here. Yeah, that still seems to break the same way. So ignore that. It's not applicable here. There's other places where it is applicable. The other thing that you have to do is just start cranking up your steps per frame. Now, I've actually seen that maximum solver iterations per step. This actually does have an effect on this type of spring. I really was running into this the other day, but let's see if that does anything. And it does stop it from super having to brute force everything, but that bird is still breaking. So let's brute force everything. Now there's 3 times as many. I mean, this should just hopefully be guaranteed to work. Extra steps per frame is taking 3 times long to calculate. No, he's still breaking. Huh. Yeah, why would that be the case? I mean, some of these turns are pretty harsh, and I think that might be where it's happening, but is this because of the harshness of the spline? Let's turn on smooth rotation here. Yeah, you see how everything, turning on smooth rotation made it interpret the spline a little bit smoother. Does that stop that from happening, or was it that jerky motion that was breaking it, or not? Probably not. Oh yeah, there he is, still broken bird. Like some of the other ones are doing fine, but that one just wants to break. Go figure. Oh look, he's broken in the beginning. Why is one? Well, I guess he's also seemingly broken a little bit in the beginning, but why would that happen? He is on a negative. No, that doesn't make a difference. 1 frame forward, 1 frame back. I mean, it's a clone. Why would some of them be not broken and one would? That doesn't make sense to me. Bird broken in the beginning. I don't know. Definitely is the run to the litter. But what do we do with them? I don't want to just I don't want to kill him off. Well, let's just drop the count down to 1 and then count it back up again. And when he respawns, let's see if he's still broken. Yeah, look, number 10 is just broken. And then look, even as I move forward, everything else still seems fine, but number 10 still seems like he hit a window somewhere. It's that one in particular. Why would that be? Now I'm starting to feel bad for him. I mean, a couple of the others are displaying some, it seems to be spreading a little bit, but it's definitely not all of them. And yeah, if I drop it down to 5, that one's broken. So weird. I'm going to delete this random. Let's see if that has anything to do with anything. Yeah, maybe. I got rid of the random factor, which is offsetting time. And maybe it was offsetting the time in that bird and the wings were up in the air. So let's see. Yeah, okay, there's bird 10, and I think the random effector was breaking him. He must have been like going backward in time or forward in time and is making the wing go to a different position. And now, so he was already broken. So all those things I was saying, like, oh, these might help fix it. They might have helped fix it, but right now it's not broken anymore. We can drop this back down to its default 5 and see if anything starts breaking, but it seems to be working pretty well. Yeah, just seeing the wings react pretty accurately is neat. Like there's just that little bit of like, oh, it's not just a flap, it's reacting to what it's being fed. Now, in addition to that, I'll save this because that was fine. I'll save it as a new version. And we're already, oh man, I didn't realize we're almost a half hour over, but that's fine. Everybody's trapped inside anyway. Let's, what I was going to say is let's get rid of the flapping entirely. So animate wing. Oh no, sorry, animate wing. So I'm going to kill off those keyframes in this file. And now he's just going to travel around and the, right? Yeah, okay, so I deleted those. I'm going to get rid of the vibrate tag as well. So no vibrate tag. So it should just be the bird traveling around. Yeah. Oh, he's like a fighter. And now it's like a plane. So that's pretty great. But now if we were to introduce some randomness for height. So I will introduce a random effector, but it's not going to offset time. It's going to only offset on Y. So we're going to give it quite a bit. And I'm not sure. Okay, that's just going to apply. Each of them is going to have a random. But if we make that it be based off of its global noise, that's going to make them shake all crazy. I'm going to say it's actually based on their UV index. And now they're moving up and down. Maybe randomly. So let's rewind. So keep in mind, there is currently no keyframes on this bird. In fact, there's no keyframes in the whole entire scene file, and there's no vibrate. The only motion is happening because this has a rate, and this random effector is saying that apply a noise to each one of them based on their UV position. Now it does. Is that okay? Yeah, this one bird is. The effectors seem to upset the birds because they suddenly get jumped to a new position and it breaks them. So it's possible that every modification that's involving an effector, like this one, might need to be transitioned into. Yeah, see, they're fine there. So I'm going to make it take a few frames. It's going to go from strength 0 to strength 100 over that time, and it might give the birds time to move to that position. And yeah, now it didn't break the wing. So just like a lot of things with dynamics, we have to transition into it. I guess we are using dynamics, so that's why we had to do it. So now, that is transitioning in, but we're now free to change these values still. So I'm going to make these go up twice. They go up and down further. And you can now still see that the birds are randomly moving up and down. In fact, I'm going to say indexed. They're moving up and down randomly based on just their own kind of unique individual noise, but you're still getting kind of this flapping motion from it with no keyframes. In this entire scene file, there is no keyframes. Looks a little weird when the guide spine's not there because they're moving so strangely. It would be fun to build in some sort of like flocking behavior and whatnot, but you can totally, this kind of thing is fun. Now we kind of went off the rails intentionally, like making a bunch of clones, and let's make more birds. Whee! How many birds? How many birds is too many birds? I think that is the perfect number of birds. Nice. Now, so we, effectively, we just made a very simple, we made the most basic version of like a rag doll bird, and we built in very basic rules on the wings. It's like, okay, the wings are constantly trying to return to their original position. And in this version, there's no flapping. It's just like they're reacting to as the scene moves around them. They move through the scene. So that part is fun. Now, it's obviously a super duper low poly thing. So you could have a full-on modeled version of a bird, like a realistic bird. And this is almost could be literally like these wings could literally be the wings that are going to be used for the bird kind of dynamically reacting to things. And all you would have to, it's not all you'd have to do. It takes some effort, but you could, I'm not going to do it, but you could make a joint chain here. So I guess the bird's not zeroed out. Okay, so we could, I'm going to pull up in there so we can see it, but you could make a joint chain, and you would want, this would be inside the wing, and you'd make exactly one of these where each one of those pivots from, and then you would start using constraint tags. There's actually several different ways. We could use constraint tags to say, this one moves and rotates wherever that one does. This one moves and rotates wherever this one does. This one moves and rotates where this one does. And then this joint chain could be, bound. You could bind it to the mesh of a different bird, and now you'd have a dynamic bird driving a not dynamic bird. And I don't know if you could still clone it, but I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. I have done tests. You could clone it. So yeah, a little extra detail there where the bird can still be potentially pretty useful. I love how they look so mechanical here, and then you just go like a few frames in, and suddenly they're going to look alive just from like the wing variation. That's so cool. Like you just a little bit up and down, and then the wings are curved. Everybody's got a completely unique wing formation here, and it's just like dead and sterile, and then boom, living flock. That's kind of neat. I like it. Can never have too many birds. Can you drive it by proxy? I'm not sure what. Oh, I don't know. I haven't done too much stuff with proxies, but yeah, the idea of like, I don't know. I don't know about driving by proxies. Let's see. Could we put them in an emitter? That's a question. We got to do that. So copy the bird. Yeah, I'll just keep it in the same scene file. Turn that off. And I don't know what this is going to do, but and they're not flapping themselves anymore, so it would just be the motion of the particles. Simulate regular old emitter. Move the bird inside. It is tangential and it shows the object. Okay, they're flying backwards, so the whole bird rig is backwards. So I'm going to just take the bird null and flip it around 180. So I spun the axis 180, which should automatically make them entirely face the other direction. And now we need the emission speed to be maybe about 1,000. And let's see. Okay, still, let's go 4,000. Okay, so we're shooting out a whole bunch of birds, which is an excellent start. And they're supposed to be tangential. So now we will add in some turbulence, of course. The birds are flying through the wind. So we'll give it a scale, decently sized scale with a strength 55. Always a good default. 55 is always kind of nice for those. It's actually having a surprising little effect. So I'm going to crank the strength up by an order of magnitude. There we go. It's enough for those to go. And yeah, they start flapping around a little bit. And it's just that these are just the particles turning, but individual dynamic wings are actually going. And that's like, that's pretty good. Great idea. Who said to put the birds in the emitter? Spatten, of course. Good job. So yeah, now we have like those are down, that's up. So they're obviously each their own thing. And we're now blasting out a whole bunch of birds. Let's see, what do we need to do? We need to make the emitter spit out birds 3 times as fast, and it has to be a bigger emitter because they'll be colliding with each other. We don't want that. So a little bit bigger of an emitter. They'll collide a little. Oh, that's not that big. We'll do that. And now we stand right in front of it. And then fire the birds. That's pretty good. Now, we could have made a rig that was entirely aerodynamic. And potentially, like, you know, they could actually be cutting through the air, like, and the wings. I think in one of my SIGGRAPH presentations, I made it so that there's a bird that the flapping of dynamic wings with like lift turned on, it was actually making the bird flap up and down. Like, so it was like you can have a feedback loop where one is driving the other, and then you can put motors so that it's not keyframes driving the flapping of the wings, but a motor that would be driving it. So there's a lot of different details there that would be pretty great. Let's see. We can't have too many birds at one time. If we turn on a render instance, all turn in the same bird, and it's boring. Although it might play really fast then. Yeah, it's all. This is now all. They're going to move around, but they're all doing the exact same wing motion. But yeah, render instances does make it run nice and smooth. Can we make a lot more birds? Yeah, there's a 100 birds still running pretty well. Okay, I think there's about as many birds as we can get. I guess it depends on, you just don't want to keep on emitting for that long. So if we only did 10 frames worth of birds, then we might be able to do like 2,000 birds. Dun, da, 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 da. Dun, da, 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 da. And now this is essentially what their motion would be, like that. And if we zoom, 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 it's actually kind of crazy how much we're not seeing the render instances. But with this giant burst of birds like that, if we were to not do a render instance, and I go 1 frame, 2 frame, I want to make sure we're not killing ourselves here. 3. Yeah, it's taking like a full 2 seconds for that to calculate. So we can't hit play in the viewport, but we could possibly send it to the picture viewer. But since we found out recently that the picture viewer didn't like one thing we did, let's be careful about what we do here. Make a sky, and we'll actually render it because then we'll have more frames we can view. Don't save. That should be fine. Now let's just see what they look like individualized. Birds, more birds. And these are all dynamically colliding with each other, which is a little bit of a problem. And it probably would have been a good idea. We didn't add much variation in here. Let's do that. Variation lifetime. Actually, we don't need too long, but we're only letting them spawn for 10, so it doesn't make a difference. Speed, 50% speed difference. End scale. I don't want an end scale. I just wanted them randomly be different scales, but we can't really do that. Yeah, I mean, the emitter is limited, so that's about as far as we can go. They'll just be slightly different speeds. But I think that variation would work. Yeah, Spaten, the dynamics should be working. Like, I think these wings are colliding with each other. Like, this is essentially behaving like a cloner. So each of those is a unique instance. And if the dynamics are working, because when the wings are different, if in different positions, that means each one is its own unique instance doing its own unique dynamic things. So there's no reason we couldn't do more detail. I don't know. Maybe tomorrow in the bonus live stream, we'll play with trying to make a fully dynamic bird and like start throwing it around like a paper airplane and try and motorize it a little bit. That might be fun. As far as like, I don't think we're gonna get a bird like properly flying because you have to worry about aerodynamic, like real aerodynamics, like the tail going up and down and the wing twisting. We're not going to do that. But as far as just being able to fling these around like a particle, but have them be fully dynamic, that would be pretty neat. To tell you the truth, I don't know if these are dynamic in the fact that they could collide with each other, because each of them is doing their own individual thing, but I don't know if we said turn on dynamics, then it gets spit out. I think they could be if the body was fully dynamic and we just flung it out, it would just take on the properties of the initial state there, and they suddenly would like drop like a rock. But if we started putting the proper dynamic settings, we might be able to make it start flapping or gliding. So I think these are dynamically reacting, but they're not like falling from dynamics. It's an interesting question, though. Man, that's a lot of birds. It's amazing how even as simple and goofy as what we did here, like it still clearly reads as birds. Birds have a good silhouette. As far as XP flocking, yeah, flocking is not terribly difficult in X particles. I mean, there's a freaking flocking modifier, so that could just be a thing. It's weird, but like I get a weird feeling like there's motion blur here, but I think it's just more birds makes it feel like there's motion blur. So yeah, this question went off the rails. Of course it went off the rails. Why wouldn't it? Actually, your name is appropriate, Chainsaw Octopus. Thanks for coming, hanging out. But what I mean is, I wonder if I can find the octopus file that I had. I'm going to, while this is continuing to render, I'm going to try and see if I can find the octopus presentation, because it was pretty cool. And it actually did. Remember, I was just saying how we could rig a bird mesh with these dynamic birds. I actually did that with an octopus. Where am I looking? My scene files, presentations. I should label these by topic. I found it. That was easy. See, once again, I'm constantly rewarded for bad behavior. Like I have a presentation folder. Actually, it's not terribly unorganized, but like here's a presentation folder, and they're marked by year, but I didn't mark them by what the presentation was. So I was like, which one is it? And I was like, 2016. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what it was. Let's see what we got here. That's kind of terrifying, but pretty wonderful for how easy that was to put together as far as just putting them into a cloner. And their dynamic wings. I didn't even do it. I totally wanted to too. The last thing I'll do on this before I open up the squid, and then we'll be done because we're approaching an hour over. We'll drop this back down to something sadly reasonable. So now we just got a couple of birds coming out. But what I wanted to do was add a second turbulence. And the second turbulence would be even stronger, but a much smaller scale. So it would make them kind of travel in the straightforward one, but maybe make them, I guess it's not gonna work vertically. Like this turbulence doesn't make them go up and down. But oh man, whatever, I'm having fun. If we make this keep on emitting birds, and they don't live forever, they only need to live for 100 frames. So we're going to keep on emitting birds. We've got turbulence, and the turbulence is randomly going to make them fly around. That's fine. But if we make a field force, simulate forces field force, we can actually apply some sort of power to them. If I make a, let's see if this actually works. Here's a field force, and I'm giving it a velocity of 55. And currently I added in a solid, which is saying go up on Y. And you see how all the birds look like they're going upward? So that's actually working quite well. So if we crank this up even more, I think it's going to make them turn right away. So traveling upward. Now what the thought is we've got a solid saying go up. It's going to be a pain to remember this, but if we make a noise, if we make a random field, and like I said, to normal first to start out. Yeah, we make a random field, make it noise. There's a noise field that they're traveling through. It's not locally sourcing them, so they'll be passing through the noise. That's risky. But the random field needs to be a mask on the solid, because the solid only wants them to go up. And I'm going to say you're a mask on the solid. So sometimes they want to go up and sometimes they don't. So you see some are curving up very quickly and some are not. Now, we already know that the noise in general doesn't clamp very much. You also can randomize the sample positions. That's interesting. That might make them each do their own thing more. I don't know. I haven't played with that enough. Don't really see a visual difference, but they are separating. Anyway, if we say that this random field should actually be outputting -100, a minimum of -100 up to a max of 100. I'm not going to get this right, but if we get it right, it might have to be -200. Let's see. If I say -2, did I get it right that quickly? That'd be crazy if I did. Yeah, I think what's happening, yeah, I think it might have worked. Essentially what we just made is a turbulence, but a turbulence that only pushes up and down, depending on where it is in the noise. We've taken a solid saying, I can only go up. And we said, okay, the randomness is going to say how much you can go up. And I said, okay, you can go up somewhere between 0 and 100. But then I said, okay, you can go up somewhere between 100 and -200. And that equation, I think, means an equal amount potentially up and down. Now, let's keep in mind that we also have the regular turbulence in here. So that could be influencing things a little bit. Actually, it does seem to be influencing things quite a bit. So maybe we haven't quite gotten to the equation. We probably have to unclamp for one. And this is adding to velocity, but I still feel like it's not that strong. I'm going to crank it up more. Okay, they still seem to be mostly going up, so maybe we didn't get it quite as quickly as I was hoping. But we're close to whatever it is that we needed it to be. Maybe it's not masked. Maybe it has to multiply. Zoom. Well, it's definitely going up and down. I'm not sure if that's actually just going up and down, although it does seem to be. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be masked. Maybe it was just supposed to be multiplied. And I thought that these are the numbers, but it's hard to remember these kind of specifics. So yeah, now it's randomly going up and down. Assuming that that's sort of working. I mean, everything's calculating really quick. But I would then give this a reasonably fast animation speed, making it so that they'd be wanting to almost constantly like up, down, up, down, up, down. Actually, we don't even necessarily have to change the animation speed because they're passing through, I think. Oh, I guess it's set to field. So I don't know. If we say none, they're all static. If I said randomize sample positions, they're all static. If we say global, they're passing through a world of noise. And that means they should be quickly changing where they're at. So if we made it small, I think it go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And some of them are, but some of them will take off vertically and they just keep going vertically. So we might have to keep draining energy out from them. I don't know. It can get complicated. And I just wanted to, I was trying to introduce a flapping motion, and I think that there might be a way to do it, but they're mostly going upward. So maybe our initial multiply is still not quite correct. Maybe it has to go down further, although this does, like, minus 100 is logical to me. More than that starts feeling not logical. But if we double it, I mean, that does feel more even. But they did go down and they did come back up again. I don't know. It's a challenge. And the strength of this, and we could say, oh, this is gonna be yeah, absolute direction is gonna make them go up, down, up, down, up, down. It gets weird. Yeah, I was hoping for a natural cycle of up and down. There's probably easier ways. We could apply a time function to it. That probably would have been a lot easier. But then they wouldn't be passing through random ones. George is saying, what if you set minus 200 to the y plus to the relative scale of the random field? I don't think that's a thing. I'm not sure what you mean. Sorry. Like, this is a relative scale, but the relative scale doesn't have any effect on all the other things. I mean, they're passing through it, so we could make this like really, really, really big. And now they're passing through a two-dimensional noise for all purposes. Yeah. So they're passing through a two-dimensional noise. Well, I must have killed something. I don't know what I did to break it, because nothing's happening. Do that. Now they're passing through a two-dimensional noise. Yeah, that just kills it by itself. Interesting. But yeah, where they're traveling through here, I'm not sure how the positions are getting sampled. There's a lot of details I'm not certain about. But it's fun. I like the birds. They're cool. They fill up the space well. It does work surprisingly well. Like, there's even, like, I feel like there's a decent amount of flapping here, considering you look at any one bird, it feels like there's a decent amount of flapping going, even though there's no flapping being built into the system. Yeah. I think that kind of wrapped up that question. It was just having fun. Suddenly, birds. 200. I think that should wrap this one up. Like I said, maybe tomorrow for the bonus stream, we'll spend a little more time playing with birds, because those were fun. Yep, extra hour for learning fun things. Oh yeah, flowers and birds. Maybe we'll do bees. We'll do the birds and the bees, and then we'll have them crash into each other and battle it out. We can finally find out, like, which one wins. Yeah, it'd be fun to build a fully dynamic bird and see what we can do with it. I probably will fully be using Signal, the plugin Signal, so that we can get looping animations very easily, instead of having to fight with because it's so easy to tweak the speed and the timing of those. Yeah, likewise, I'm happy to be stuck at home with all of you guys and gals and people from all over the world. It's really fun. Yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out. Is there anything else to mention? I don't think so. It's true. It's completely consuming everybody's life. But yeah, thanks for the questions. We'll tackle more again next week. I'll be here at the same time again, and tomorrow's a bonus stream. So thank you so much. If you want to support, I've got a Patreon set up. You can head over there, and then you get access to all the scene files I was just saving, and the bonus stream and things like that. And early access to tutorials and whatnot. If you haven't seen already, I came out with a 3-part tutorial, which I think is pretty cool. With it's probably, if you're on YouTube, it's probably like somewhere immediately. The 3-part tutorial about cloth simulations, which I think is pretty cool, and doing product reveals. And that should wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow or next week. So bye-bye.